Good morning, DJ and PK. It's 97.5 The Zone. Welcome in on a Friday morning. Well, of all the hot stove leagues, of all the off-season trade windows, personnel windows, for lack of a better term, off-season prices right. Football, basketball, baseball. I mean, the NBA really does it right. I've never really followed hockey that close because we haven't had a team. That'll change coming up. But I just think basketball, the way they go from the finals right into the draft in a week, right into free agency and the trades that come with it, I think it's fascinating. And we had a pretty interesting trade yesterday. Bulls in Oklahoma City. Chicago sends Alex Caruso to Oklahoma City. The Thunder send Josh Giddey to Chicago. I get why both these teams made this trade. I think the Thunder are the winner. I really like what the Thunder did. I think this signals that Chicago is starting over. Their core guys are 30. Drummond's 30, and he's a free agent. Caruso is 30. He had 1 year left on his deal. Now, Zach LaVine is signed. He's got big money coming up. He's over $40 million now, and he's signed next year and the year after, and he's got an option for the year after that. I think if you add it all up, he's owed like $135 or $140 million, something like that. He's got a lot of money coming his way. He's 29. DeRozan's 34. He's a free agent. I think we're seeing Chicago start over. So they were looking for somebody younger. A lot of teams threw draft picks at him. Maybe they don't want to wait that long. They get a guy who's 3 years in. He doesn't really fit with the roster now, but if they move the older guys or let them walk as free agents, or move them in sign-in trades, whatever they end up doing. Maybe Giddey's the future there. He didn't shoot the three well. He's getting better. I think it was like 28% to 32% to 34%. It's still not good enough, but there is progress, and maybe in another 2 or 3 years, he'll be a 38 or 40% shooter. But Oklahoma City, A, I don't think they believe that, and B, even if they do, they want to win now. They're not here waiting for somebody to get better in 2 or 3 years. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. Get Caruso. He's 30. He's ready to win. He's been in the playoffs, a little with the Bulls, more with the Lakers and the bubble. I think I looked it up. He's played like 31 playoff games. So he's got postseason experience. They want to win next year. They're right there. They're in the mix. Could it be them? Sure. Could it be Denver? Yes. Could it be Minnesota? Yes. Will it be Dallas again? I mean, we can go on, and we got to let these next few weeks in the NBA trade machine and the NBA Price is Right game play out to see what the rosters look like. But I get why the Thunder did this. A guy who's shooting 28, 32, 34% from three, they get rid of him. They bring in a guy with playoff experience who shot 41% from three last year, who's a career 38% shooter from three. Who has shot 40% or better from the three-point arc 3 times. But he's not a volume shooter and scorer. He makes winning plays without getting the ball, without getting shots. Last time, at the age of 30, Caruso, undrafted, he's never been a priority in an offense. He doesn't need to get a lot of shots to be effective. He can impact games with his defense. He can guard multiple positions. They can switch and switch and switch some more. Now, he's not a big guy, so if you play in Minnesota, you can't really, put him on Cat or Gobert. But he can pretty much guard anybody else. He can guard a point guard. He can guard wings. So he can guard 3, maybe 4 positions on the floor, depending on who's on your team. If you go Twin Towers, he can't guard 4. So I get why they did this. Now, I don't know that he's the winning missing piece and all that, but I think he makes him better. Right? And it's still going to be about Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. It's about your stars, but they got a guy who can make an open shot if the defense helps, if the defense cheats. And they got a guy who will defend, and they got a guy who can play in transition. He'll help you defend. And, all during the playoffs, we've been talking about look at the rebound numbers and look at the turnover numbers. Get more possessions. And it's always better to beat a team in transition than it is to try to score once they have their defense set. Obviously. And he's a guy, just watch his clips. He's real comfortable in transition. So this isn't a massive move for the Thunder. This is a move around the edges. But I think it's the kind of move around the edges that championship teams have to make, right? When Denver had a deeper bench, they won the title. This year, they were really riding 5 guys. And when they went to their bench, they just didn't have it. Now, they came pretty close. And maybe if they could have beaten Minnesota in Game 7, they would have pulled it off. But who was deep? Boston. Look how many different guys Boston had who could make plays and impact the game. It's not just their starting 5. They could bring a couple guys off the bench, and Pritchard can hit shots, and Horton came in when he had to, and those guys don't start. They can get help off their bench. So I get why the Thunder did this. I get why the Lakers hired J.J. Redick. I don't know. It's weird to say. I don't know why they did it, but I get it. I thought they had a perfectly good coach. I don't know why the star players fell out with him. Now, clearly, to me, and probably to most of you, their roster's not good enough. It doesn't matter who the coach is. They're going to be frustrated. And that's just the way it goes. And so why does Redick take the job? Well, because they're going to pay him a lot of money. And it's a challenge. And you want to be in the league. You want to be in the mix. You want to have the adrenaline. Are they going to go out and win 60 games and win the title? No. But Jerry Sloan had, I think, 3 60-win seasons in his entire career. Went to 2 finals, never won the title, went to 6 conference finals. But he loved it. He loved the competition. He loved being in the mix. It gets the juices flowing. You got to do something, and you can't play anymore. So when Jerry was done playing, he coached. Redick's done playing. He's doing podcasts. He don't want to talk about it. He wants to get as close to the floor as he can. And now as a coach, that's as close as you can get. So, and they're going to pay him really well. And yeah, they're probably going to fire him. He's probably not going to make it to the end of his contract. Sure, they love him now, but will LeBron love him in a year or two? I get it. I get all of that. But man, if you're Redick, they're going to pay you. You're going to do something you love. You're probably not going to get all the way to the mountaintop, but at least you get to try. So I get that part. But the Lakers got to have a better roster. All right, DJ and PK, we got to take a break. When we come back, the Stanley Cup Finals, we've got Game 6 coming up tonight. Can Florida close it out? Can Edmonton win at home, force a Game 7? They were down 3-0. Can they win 3 in a row? Interesting story. Connor McDavid, the game's biggest star, arguably one of the top 10, 5, maybe next to Gretzky, the second best player ever. What's his role in all of this comeback? We will talk about that next. And man, when we did these interviews, it took a hilarious twist. We'll explain next. Stay with us. Good morning, DJ and PK. It's 97.5 The Zone. We are proudly presented by Murdoch Hyundai, Utah's #1 Hyundai dealer for 18 years in a row. So we're doing the show yesterday, and something happens that has never happened before. And for you, the early risers, I want to get you up to speed and let you hear it because it was hilarious, just because it was so surprising. So Jake and I are talking about the show, and usually when PK's gone, we go to a little interview heavy. And so, what are the topics? What should we be talking about? Well, we got the NBA and NHL drafts coming up. What if we just do a draft segment, a draft hour, right? And a back-to-back interviews. So Jake sets it up. So we got an NBA guy coming on at 8:30, got an NHL guy coming on at 8 o'clock. So the 8 o'clock hour starts, and I introduce Jay Stevens, who does the hockey podcast for us here on The Zone and is our hockey insider. And he comes on. Now, these days, a lot of people have multiple jobs. It's not exactly new. As you know, I've had multiple jobs for decades, right? So Jay has another job. And his other job interrupts very quickly into the interview. And to let you experience it in its fullness, we'll discuss in a moment. But first, here's the start of the 8 o'clock hour as I introduce Jay. And Jay, before we talk draft, and we do want to talk draft, we ought to talk Stanley Cup Final. Teams have come back from 3-0 before, and Edmonton's trying to do it. But to do it in the final against Florida seems like a long shot. But then again, I didn't think there'd be a Game 6. And here we are. Jay.
Oh, man.
Well, Jay,
what a ride, right? What a ride.
Yeah, right. What is it? Game 4 didn't surprise me. The same thing happened in the NBA. You're up 3-0. You're on the road. Everybody wants to win at home. It's more fun. And the other team's going to be more desperate. You know you've got 4 games to play with. And it gets out of hand. You get blown out. These things happen. But Game 5, the Celtics slammed the door as I expected. Game 5, Edmonton won on the road. Well. So now what?
Yeah, a bit of a surprise, really. And I was thinking the same thing. I'm like, well, this is great. It's going to play out just like the NBA, and it's great. Edmonton gets a win at home, and, that's good for them. But, what? Actually, I have to go. David, I have to go. I'm sorry. I'm working at the firehouse right now, and I just got toned out.
Oh, all right. Well, go put out a fire.
Sorry about this. We'll catch up later.
Yeah, Jay had to go. He's a fireman. The alarm went off, and they all got to hop on the truck and go on a call. So we spent the rest of the segment trying to figure out whether he's on 5-alarm fire that's going to make all the headlines, and they're going to be out until midnight and miss meals and doing the hard work that firemen sometimes have to do. Or cat in a tree, he'll be back in 20 minutes, or some 9-year-old pulled an alarm. And And so it turns out that not long after that, Jay texts Jake and says, well, if you got time later in the show, we're going to be back. So Jake comes back on and explains what happens. And then we get to talk Stanley Cup Finals and Utah Hockey Club and NHL Draft. Okay, Jay, it's all quiet right now. Am I right?
It's all quiet. We put the fire out. It wasn't actual fire this time. So
it was. So they
we put it out.
Wow. Okay. Went out. We did. We had a full segment to mess around with, so we were speculating whether you were out on, the 4-alarm fire and you're going to be there after the sun goes down, or if it was cat in a tree, or if a 9-year-old pulled a fire alarm because he's bored in the summer. Yeah,
well, I do get all of that stuff. That's the great thing about my job is that you never know what you're going to get, but you do get a lot of just random stuff.
All right. I didn't know you could knock out a fire and be done with it and have it all cleaned up and all done and be back in an hour.
This one was a small brush fire that somebody threw a cigarette out their car window.
Brutal.
39th South and 11th East. So we saved the day.
You actually did. I was in Sacramento, and we staffed all the 49er home games and drove down, and we're at a game with the Lions, and all of a sudden there's cut-ins, there's a fire, ash is falling inside the stadium, and it was the Berkeley fire. I mean, there were multiple fatalities, a massive fire, and I left the game, did the post game, and then had to go over and meet crews there, and we had to get video. And yeah, I was in the middle of my clothes smelled like smoke. Had my uncle with me; he could not believe it. He was in on all of that, and that wasn't the first time I was in Santa Barbara. We were doing the 6 o'clock news, and the Painted Cave fire broke out, and I think there was one death, and there were tons of homes lost in that. And it burned for a day and a half.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've seen a couple of them. So, I mean, we can joke that it's a little grass fire, and a lot of little grass fires get knocked down, but every once in a while one of those really takes off, and then it's horrific and tragic.
Yeah, and I've been on a lot of those too, and it takes a lot of time and effort to get those under control. And I'm glad that's not what I was dealing with this morning.
Right, exactly. Well, good work there. Now, back to the meaningless hockey.
Yeah, let's talk hockey.
So, when we were so rudely interrupted, all I know is sound effects from Emergency.
Yeah, same. That's my ringtone, so I get it.
Oh, nice. So the Edmonton Oilers are down 3-0 in the Stanley Cup Final, a lot like the Dallas Mavericks. Like the Mavericks, at home in Game 4, they summon this huge effort, and, the team that's up, we get another game. So it turns into a blowout. But whereas the Celtics went home and closed out in Game 5, Florida went home for Game 5, and Edmonton beat them 5-3, and Connor McDavid was great. But can Connor McDavid put him on his shoulders again? Can Edmonton – I mean, to come back from 3-0 in the Stanley Cup Finals, that would really fulfill Connor McDavid's destiny as the number one pick in the draft, as the quote-unquote next Wayne Gretzky, even though no one really believes that. If you're the greatest thing since Wayne Gretzky, my gosh, there's been a lot of good hockey players between now and then. So, but that would live up to all the hype for him if he pulls this off with the Oilers. Yeah,
it'd be an amazing story, right? And you kind of start pulling for that a little bit, although I've believed Florida would win this Stanley Cup since December. I mean, they almost had it last year. I can't see him letting it escape this year. But, all the talk in games 1, 2, and 3 is Bobrovsky is the Conn Smythe winner. He's unscore-onable. He's going to be the guy. And then, Game 4 and Game 5, it's McDavid. So that kind of changes the Conn Smythe talk too, right? Like, who's going to be the MVP? And it would be amazing to see, and McDavid just broke one of Gretzky's records in Game 4 with the assist. Granted, he has 6 more games to do it, but, it's kind of like that Jordan-LeBron thing where, Jordan never went to a Game 7, so we wouldn't know. Jordan didn't lose that series. That's kind of the same thing with Gretzky back in the day. He lost his first time in the Stanley Cup and then never again. So to cement that, to say that, yeah, you were supposed to be the next one, and now you're kind of living up to that. That'd be awesome for him. Great storybook ending, but I don't want to see it. I want to see Florida close it out. I want to see him beat Edmonton in Edmonton, and I just think Florida's earned it all year, playing that rough, brutal, physical style of hockey all year. It takes a toll, and I thought they were, peaking at the right time. So that's kind of what I want to see, but, I know I'm kind of just one voice. My house was full of Canadians. I was the only one rooting for Florida in the last game. So it's interesting to hear the Canadians pick on it. Plus, like, the last 12 Stanley Cups have all gone to U.S. teams. So maybe Canada's due, and maybe McDavid's due.
As we bring Utah sports fans, I mean, there are NHL fans here, but then there's also sports fans who are, more casually into hockey. Just to put Connor McDavid's career into perspective here, he's 27, right?
Yes.
He's 27. Let's assume that he's halfway through his career. Maybe that'll turn out to be true, maybe not, but ballpark. If you double his career numbers, I looked it up, he's 982 points, right? Goals and assists combined. And if you double that, which would be about a full career, it would put him up around 1,300 games. There are guys who played more. Some guys play 1,700 games. But let's just say this is halfway. If you double him, he actually becomes the number 2 scorer in NHL history behind Gretzky. He passes Gordie Howe. He passes Mark Messier. He passes Jaromir Jagr. I don't know what generation you're from, but there's 3 awesome players that dominated their generations and created legacies that, resonate even now. So is McDavid really that guy? We're talking a top 10, top 5, potentially second best player in the history of NHL. Because celebrity draws, is he really that level of celebrity?
Yeah, he is. But let's not forget his supporting cast, too. Like, they've built a big team around him where their only weak link was goaltending. And they've got – and Skinner's been amazing. Like, you can't blame any of those losses on Skinner. But McDavid really is that player. He has that – the speed he has, the ability to – like, you see Florida put 3 guys on the defensive line – to, on their blue line, just stop him from coming in, and he still shakes them. Like, the head of speed that guy gets on him, and just the way he's able to shift, it's almost like he's not even on skates. It's almost like he's in a kayak or something, the way he can just turn. Like, you don't even need to worry about a straight blade. He's generational for sure. Is he the number 2 best player? And keep in mind, Ovechkin's still chasing that scoring title, too. So I would have to say, yeah, like, He's proving it right now. Everything that we've doubted about him, everything we've said, well, if Gretzky would have won a cup by now. And granted, the NHL is not the NHL that Gretzky played in, but McDavid really is proving himself right now. And you can see the confidence growing in him. Not that he wasn't confident to begin with, but with that 8-1 win, and then the game the other night, you can see that he's starting to believe that maybe he really is going to get over this hill. And he's doing everything it takes. He's doing everything you could ask of your captain, of a first pick overall. He's just doing it. He's put the team on his back, and he's making everybody around him better. He's feeding these guys goals. Everybody's focused on him, and then he makes that amazing backdoor pass, right? So he's that guy, and I think he's going to prove it.
When Dave Checketts brought Real Salt Lake to Utah, he was talking to a handful of people, and I was in the group, and he was talking about that the difference, and he learned this because he'd been here as a Jazz president and went to New York to run Madison Square Garden and to run the Rangers and the Knicks. And the Knicks got to Game 7 when Jordan was playing baseball and lost to Houston. But the Rangers got there with Messier and won it all. And he said, but the difference is in basketball, you got to have Jordan because if you have Jordan, you win, and if you don't, you lose. He said, it's awesome to have Mark Messier. He's a tremendous player, and he's a great leader, but it's about the team, and you've got to have the depth because you've got, 3 guys on a line and 4 lines. You got a pair of defensemen, and you're rotating through 3 sets there. He says, you got to be 20 deep, and you got to be able to absorb injuries in a physical game. So as we watch this series unfold, and as we try to figure out how the Utah Hockey Club is going to build, how much you buy into celebrity and stardom at the top of the roster, and how much are you concerned about guy 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20? Because if your third set of defensemen leak goals, the other guys do great work, and then the other guys go up there and give up 3 goals, and you lose the game. So how do you balance the stardom and the celebrity versus the depth and always being rock solid no matter who's on the ice?
Yeah, in hockey, it's gotta be about, the team. It's great to have a celebrity, and the celebrities will sell tickets. And honestly, Utah has a couple of those. We really do with Clayton Keller and Logan Cooley. Those guys are going to be those phenomenal players. People are going to pay to see them do these amazing goals. But then you do have to balance things out, and that's where the importance comes in. That's why you have teams. Like every team that's been eliminated so far has a celebrity player, has that big name player, But what Florida has is 4 balanced lines of just everybody buying into the same program. And that's the other thing you got to draft for. You got to draft for guys that get the game. It's not about the individual effort. It's about how can I make my teammates better. That's what the NHL is all about. That's how you get players like teams like Florida and Vegas last year. You know, Vegas had a lot of players go down with injury, and the next guy stepped up, and the next guy believed in the team concept and knew the systems and believed in the system. They didn't try to do it all by themselves. They stuck to the plan, and that's what you have to have in the NHL. I think that's one of the things that separates it, and that's why in every interview you see with an NHL player, they're not saying, I did this. They say, we, us, we. And that's because you can't win by yourself. You can't just have Jordan. You can't just have McDavid. You have to have a well-balanced roster. And, man, I'm looking at some of the guys that are up for draft that we can pick, and there are some legitimate quality guys. There's 2 guys that we could potentially draft this year that could step right into the NHL. They're that good. They're that ready at 18, 19 years old. Are you ready to start talking names? You want to start talking about
I am,
and
I'm really curious about that concept. So how often does it happen? Who are those guys? How many of them are there? Because we all watch the NFL draft and we all expect rookies to contribute. And we all look at the NBA and know there needs to be some development. And we look at Major League Baseball and we know most of these guys go to the minors. So where does hockey fit in that? And give us the names of the guys who could step right in and help the Utah Hockey Club.
Hockey is more like baseball. Typically, you draft this 18, 19-year-old kid and you let him either finish in juniors where he's at, or they finish their NCAA career, and that gives them 3 to 4 more years to develop under like legitimate coaches, development-style coaches, especially at the NCAA level. And there's a couple kids right now. There's one kid I would really like to see us draft. If he's still available, there's a 6'7", 207-pound defenseman out of Russia, Anton Saleyev, and that kid could step right into the game right now. Doubtful that he's still available. I've looked at like 15 different mock drafts and ran a bunch of different mock drafts, and he typically goes in the top 5 picks. But if you get one of those top 5 teams that wants a forward instead of a defenseman, because there's a few really good defensemen or forwards available, that gives us that Anton Saleyev. Now, if that doesn't happen, what more than likely is going to happen is we're going to get a guy named Zeev Buyam out of Denver University. 19 years old, 6 foot, 180 pounds. He's great physical. He's got the whole game, and he could spend 2 more years playing at Denver University. They just won the national championship, and he was the anchor for that. So that guy could step in eventually. Then Sam Dickinson, who's playing in the Ontario Hockey League right now. He's a big kid, too, 6'3", 205 pounds, and that kid could step right in right now. He's got an NHL body. He's got an NHL mindset, and I could see him coming and at least playing in our AHL team, if not making the NHL roster the first year he's drafted. So those are the top 3 picks that I think we're going to go for. Bill Armstrong has talked a lot about he knows he wants defensemen. He knows he wants really big-body defensemen that can move the puck. And those top 3 guys I just mentioned can do that. But he's also said, with that 6th pick, I'm going to take the best overall player available at the time. That 6th pick in the first round, he's not necessarily going to pick for positional need for the team. He's going to take the best player. And then I just heard a rumor last night that he might actually break from his tradition and trade that pick for something. He's open. Although I had him on my show last week. We'll see that episode next week. He said expect them to draft. So I really expect us to take that Denver University. Again, his name is Zeev Buyam. I know we've heard a lot of different pronunciations for his name. I actually had a chance to talk to the kid. He's amazing. Really funny kid. So that's really who I think we're going to get.
I want to go back to Celia because it's 6'7", 207 pounds. That sounds a little bit string beanish type. 6'7", 207. How much weight does he have to put on? Does he really crush people? 6'7", that's like 5-6 inches. 5-6 inches taller than, I mean, most hockey players are in the 5'10" to 6'2" range, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. And to see a guy like this, because of what we've had in the past. Are you familiar with Zdeno Chara from Boston?
No.
For all those years? Again, 6'7", on skates, you're looking 7 feet tall. He was skinny when he got drafted, ends up getting traded from Calgary to Boston, becomes the best defenseman in the league. And not only that, he bulked up, right? So if you get this kid at 6'7", and you get him at 245, but he's lean and can skate, and he'll just start bullying people in front of the net, just like Chara did. And people would drop the gloves with Chara all the time, but they couldn't reach him, right? You're not going to punch this guy. You're not going to get through that reach. So that's what everybody's looking at this kid, and that's what the first thing that came to my mind. And he's playing in the KHL right now, in the Russian equivalent of the NHL. So he's 18 years old. He's already playing against grown men, and he's dominating at 18. That's like the KHL is a lot of times considered to be the second best league in the world because they're paying oil money to get really good players. We like to believe it's the AHL, but, you get a lot of these adults that are willing to jump ship and go over there and play. Instead of playing for $90,000 in the AHL, they'll go over there and play for $2 million or $5 million of oil money to play in Russia. So he's over there playing in that league, dominating, and you bulk that kid up and keep his skating ability and give him a good skills coach, and you're going to have another Zdeno Chara. So I think that's if there's a chance he slips that 6th pick, we're going to pull the trigger on it. But I don't know. The Ducks also need defense, and they pick at 3. I could see them taking him too, just off that potential. There's some goalies in there too. We just signed our starting goalie in the AHL again. I think he competes for that number 2 spot for us. So I think we're looking defenseman in that first pick. And keep in mind, we do have 13 picks this year. So Utah fans are going to have, you're going to have to watch that second day. First day is going to be exciting, but the second day, we've got 3 picks in the second, 3 picks in the third. It's just going to be fun to watch all these names get picked, and Utah players are going to have to start pulling up YouTube videos to see what we're getting and get familiar with these junior A leagues or major junior leagues out of Canada.
What's the minor league setup going to be for the Utah Hockey Club? Will there be an AHL team and an ECHL team or not?
So they don't have an ECHL agreement right now, but we do have an AHL agreement. So that team stayed in Tucson. The Tucson Roadrunners are going to be our AHL team this year, and most of those players are returning. And then whoever we draft, I expect to see them play a little bit this year. And I think you've seen the notice now. They're going to hold a prospect camp, and on July 5th, we're going to get the opportunity to see a lot of these AHL players come here and play in the Delta Center with whoever we take in the first round. So it's going to be pretty exciting to see. So that's the agreement. I'm sure they're going to figure something out for the ECHL because we've got to have a place to park a third starting goalie. That's typically what the NHL clubs will do. You'll have your 1 and your 2 will be up in the NHL. Your 3 and 4 will be in the AHL, but sometimes your 4 actually gets sent to the East Coast League and is the starter in the East Coast League or the ECHL so that they can get the most reps. And Utah Grizzlies fans should be familiar with that because the Colorado Avalanche have been giving us really good goalies. And it's goalies that, like Trent Miner, who we expected to see play up. We expect to see these guys do really well and develop. But they can't just be the backup in the AHL and do that. So that's usually why you have a good agreement in the ECHL and send a starting goalie there. So even if we just agree with the club, it could even be Utah. Like we could agree with the Utah Grizzlies and say, hey, the Avalanche are going to send you a goalie. We're going to give you a goalie. It just depends on who actually has a number 3 or 4 goalie that they're willing to give to an ECHL team. And that could be us, especially with all these draft picks. And we have really good goaltending too. We have solid goaltenders in the AA and a great Connor Ingram's a great starting goalie for us. So I can't see us going after too much in the draft, but yeah, that's the setup right now. I know we're looking for an ECHL place to at least put a goalie and maybe a couple players to develop.
All right, we'll leave it right there. I'm really glad we got through the segment without you getting called out, so that's good.
Me too.
Rock solid right there. No worries. It just makes it more exciting. We were talking about that's the first time that's happened. We did once have a big-time college football and basketball reporter. We never found out why, but he quit early in an interview very quickly, and we always assumed those guys usually have multiple phones, and we assumed there was a really big name on another line. But he's like, hey, I got to go. Bang. And he was gone. At least with you, we heard the sound in the background. We knew what was up with you there, Jay. So.
Well, I like to make it exciting,
Yeah, we do
add
too.
a little drama to the show.
I like it. Thanks, Jay. We appreciate it.
All right, thanks, guys.
All right, there's Jay Stevens eventually. He works for Unified Fire. That was hilarious that he got called out there. That was totally unexpected. But now we'll probably reference it every time we have him on going forward. DJ and PK were brought to you in part by America First Credit Union. Get the official debit cards of the Utah Jazz, University of Utah Sports, Real Salt Lake, and more exclusively at America First Credit Union. DJ and PK, this is 97.5 The Zone. It is time now to talk about the NBA draft. Jake Weingarten joins us from stockrisers.com. Jake, good morning.
Good morning, guys. Appreciate you having me.
Thanks for coming on. Now, you spend all year watching college basketball, preparing for this week. Is it Christmas morning, or are you feeling the pressure getting the mock draft right?
Yeah, it does feel like Christmas morning, honestly, between draft season and the transfer portal kind of, winding down and, still going on somewhat. It definitely does feel like Christmas, but draft season's the best. And, it starts when the hot weather starts coming around and, it's definitely the best time of the year.
The draft has really changed over the years. It is more international, not just European guys, players in Australia, G League Ignite, although that will be a short window and that'll go away and go back to the way it was. And these players are playing at different levels, which I think makes them trickier to evaluate. The draft has gotten so young, its potential, which makes it tricky to evaluate. But I feel like most of us lack the biggest piece of the puzzle. The executives, the coach, the GM, scouts, they get to sit down and interview a lot of these guys and talk to them and get a sense of who they are and how badly do they want to succeed at this and how hard are they going to work. And because it's so much on potential, it's going to take a lot of work to get there. Ask Luka Doncic, right? He's awesome, and he hasn't gotten to the top of the mountain yet. So if he's working at it, so is everybody else. How much of a blind spot do you feel like it is for you because you don't have that kind of access?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, the character check's a really big deal.
Yeah.
Those pre-draft interviews, I don't think people from the outside looking in understand how big of a deal it is. You look at a guy like Cam Reddish a couple of years ago and even Anthony Edwards a couple of years ago, too. There were a lot of questions surrounding their love for the game kind of going into the pre-draft just based off their interviews. And, it is a really big deal to teams. This is your future you're talking about. You don't want to invest a first-round draft pick and, publicity stunt. You want to invest your first-round draft pick in a guy that loves the game, is going to go in and work hard every day. And, I think guys like Paolo Banchero and Victor Wembanyama have kind of set the bar high. But even those guys that you find in the late rounds, you look at a guy like Josh Hart and Jalen Brunson here in New York City that were kind of drafted late, that, work hard every day. They were just on the radio with Tom Thibodeau talking about their pre-draft process. And, I don't understand how those four-year college guys kind of fall that far considering the experience and their love for the game. But those pre-draft interviews are huge. And, not everybody besides the executives and the GMs have a really good idea of what they're going to get in the player in those type of picks. But, obviously with the combine now and, more social media and kind of an idea of how players are, working through their coaches and stuff like that, I don't think people are really that much blindsided anymore.
So many of these guys are 19, and Dalton Connect is 23 years old. So how do you weigh that? How do you balance them? We were all watching the NCAA tournament. The ball started going in the bucket, and it didn't stop. It was very impressive. 37, I think, against Purdue and 40 against Kentucky. I mean, he's just filling it up.
Mm-hmm.
But he's 4 years older than everybody else. And defensively, what's he going to give up at the other end of the floor?
Yeah, no, obviously the offensive side of the ball is huge now. There are a lot more defensive-minded coaches in the league now, I feel like. But if you can get a guy like Dalton Connect on a team that already has some pieces on the defensive end, I do think it's a no-brainer. I do think he might end up falling a couple spots. I have seen him anywhere from 5 to 7. But if he could fall to a team, like let's say Sacramento at 13, I think you're in luck. You got a couple of defensive pieces on that team. Obviously, the analytics wouldn't show that they're much of a really good defensive team the last few seasons, but they're young and they're very versatile. But I mean, a guy that could put up 37 against the best team in the country. And, it wasn't just an NCAA tournament thing. He was doing it all year long, and he was doing it at an impressive clip. Obviously, there were some games where they needed 30 shots out of him, but I mean, it's a no-brainer if you get a guy like that on the board. And there's a guy like that on the board that might get picked a little higher than him, like Reed Shepherd, that, was at Kentucky around a lot of talented pieces, so he might have not been able to show his full scoring prowess. But I do think Reed Shepherd and Dalton Knecht are two of the best scorers in the entire draft.
Do you know who's going to go number one at this point? It was Sarr, the kid playing in Australia for a long time, but then I've seen him not in the number one spot anymore.
Yeah, I would take Alex Sarr at one, but I've been kind of in a bind of who I'd pick. To be honest, I kind of have a sleeper number one pick. He will probably end up going top four, but I love Stephon Castle. Obviously, he's a kid I've scouted for 5 to 6 years, so I'm a little biased, but I do think he's the best perimeter defender in the entire draft. But I also think, just like I mentioned, Reed Shepherd, he was at UConn, so wasn't really able to show his full, offensive prowess. But when you can get a guy that's obviously 18 years old, 19 years old, he's very young. He'll have a 15-year career in the league. He's defensive-minded, prides himself on, the dirty work. Like, you look at a guy like Draymond Green, obviously he's not the best scorer in the league. He brings that grit, but, he's going to be the first guy to dive on the floor and play defense. That's what Stephon Castle provides, but he also has an underrated offensive game, and I've seen him anywhere from 3 or 4, but it wouldn't surprise me if one of those teams in the 3 to 5 range tries to trade up for him and take him in the top 3.
So when you're filling out your mock draft, how much are you sitting there thinking, no matter what I put down here, there are going to be trades next week, and it is going to scramble the draft order?
Yeah, it happens every year. I think there's always a trade in the top 10. There's definitely always trades in the mid-first round, but, this year I feel like the teams kind of have a good read of what they want to provide. This is one of the years that, it's very unpredictable. I feel like people have kind of been doubting this draft class very early, but there are guys. I do feel like there's going to be more trades when you look at the 10 to 15 range, when you look at guys like Ron Holland and Modest Buzelis from G League Ignite. You look at those two guys right there. Those are two guys that I've heard are, rumored to be going anywhere from 8 to 15. So you look at guys like that and just the teams that are kind of in that range. Some of them, were contending teams. I mentioned the Kings before, who have been in the playoffs the last 2 years. So I do think there's going to be a good amount of trades, but I don't think many of them will come in like the top 5, the top 7. I think there will be more trades within picks 10 through 20.
Jake Weingarten, owner of StockRisers.com, covering college basketball and the NBA draft, joining us here. The Utah Jazz are currently 10th. Now, if I put $20 on the table, and everybody knows I won't do that because I'm cheap, but if I did and say, I will give you that $20 if you correctly predict, will they or won't they draft 10th, which one would you pick? What will Danny Ainge do?
I do think Danny Ainge will make that pick. Obviously, the Jazz were also a team that I feel like was doubted the last 2 years, but they have the pieces to make the playoffs. I don't see why not. You got Laurie, you got Walker Kessler, another guy I've scouted for a long time. Keontae George is phenomenal. I feel like he was one of the steals of the draft last year. I do say they keep the pick, and, I would go guard, honestly. I would take another point guard that can kind of create space and let Keontae be off the ball a little bit and kind of move around. You look at a guy like Devin Carter, a guy like Rob Dillingham, if he's available. You want a point guard that can score the ball. Obviously, they're fine with their bigs. They got, like I said, Walker and Laurie handling everything in the paint. And obviously, Laurie's a perimeter threat too. But if you can get a guy like Devin Carter or a guy like Rob Dillingham at 10, I think you got to do it, especially with what you have around you. And if you do get a pairing of a Rob Dillingham and Keontae George, or Devin Carter and Keontae George, along with the pieces they already have, I do think you got to stick at 10, take that pick, and, it's definitely worth the risk.
Love to go back and look at old drafts and redraft them, and no matter which year you pick, you can find players who went really early who should have never – they can't even stick in the league. they're out so fast. There are busts everywhere. So of the top 10 picks, assuming the Jazz are either going to pick 10th or trade up and maybe pick earlier, of the top 10 picks, who would you definitely stay away from because they're that guy who's going to be washing out of the league real fast, and we're going to look back when we redraft in 5 or 10 years and go, what in the world did that team pick that guy for?
I don't want to get myself on frozen cold takes here in a couple of years, but I think that's the one question about this draft is, which team is going to go wrong and, who's going to be in a tough spot to, thrive in the league. And, I don't want to take any knocks at Nikola Topic or, any of the Euro guys. But the Euro game, obviously, not everybody's Luka Doncic. Let's put that out there. But you do look at the Euro guys that are projected to go in the top 10. If I were to have to answer this question or pivot a little bit, I would say, one of the Euro guys would likely to fall in that bust category, but it's way too early to even determine that. But, obviously the Euro game is much different from the NBA. So if they don't know what they're coming into, it's going to be tough sailing for them because, like I said, not everyone's going to have the career Luka had going from 14-year-old pro to NBA superstar at 25. But, it's definitely way too early to determine that. But, hopefully for the Euro guys that'll get drafted in the lottery, they know how tough the transition is and, they'll be prepared to play, at a high level going into the NBA in year one.
Well, enough about the 2024 draft. BYU fans want to talk about the 2025 draft. Do the Cougars have 2 legit lottery picks? How excited should BYU fans be?
Oh, they should be thrilled. This team overall, when you can get, in year one, first of all, I talked to a 2026 recruit the other day. I know that's far from now, but the contact period just started, meaning college coaches can, reach out to high school sophomores. And all the kids I heard from BYU are blown away with the staff. To bring in a guy that, worked with a Devin Booker, worked with a Kevin Durant, worked, with a team that made the NBA Finals, it's very enticing. And you throw that with a program that's had success over the last few years. And, obviously some of these kids haven't been to BYU, but you get a high-class facility in the middle of the mountains and you get a great coaching staff behind it, and you're in one of the best conferences in college basketball. It's very enticing, but BYU fans should be thrilled. Igor, I think he'll be a top 10 pick, 6'9", prototypical NBA wing, elite offensive player. I compare him to Franz Wagner. I do think he's got slightly a little bit more athleticism than Franz, but, they're both 6'8", 6'9", 3-level scorers, improving defenders, but elite offensive players. And then you look at Cannon Catchings. That's another guy I've scouted for years. Another 6'10". He's a hybrid forward. Very efficient. And the overtime league's gotten knocked the last few years, but, they've had 10 to 15 high major top 100 recruits cross by. So he's playing the best competition, and he's doing it at a high rate. I think he will start the year probably coming off the bench, but obviously they're going to be 8 to 9 deep in a team that's going to win. I think Coach Young is going to probably flip-flop the lineup a little bit. And, when you come around March and you're fighting to win the conference, I don't think you can leave Cannon Catchings coming off the bench. But, regardless if he starts or comes off the bench, he's going to be a 25-minute-a-game player just because he's so skilled and he provides so much. And you put him next to Igor and Hall at point guard and, everyone else that they brought in, this team has a legitimate chance to win the conference next year.
Well, see, Ute fans want to put you on freezing cold takes for that one. But Cougar fans are loving it. You can't please all the people all the time. There's nothing you do. Just say what you think. Everything will make you popular, and everything will make you despised. There's nothing you can do, Jake. It's the way rivalries work.
Right.
All right.
But yeah,
go ahead.
But, yeah, the last thing I wanted to mention is, you talk about the coaching hires that went through this cycle. I do think BYU had the best one. And that's not a knock to, Coach Pope, who was down there at BYU, or Pat Kelsey at Louisville, or Coach Calipari or Musselman. But this coaching cycle was, ridiculous. So if you're BYU and you're getting the steal of the coaching cycle, fans should be very excited.
Jake, thanks for the time. We appreciate it.
Appreciate it, guys.
When we come back, what is trending? The headlines are on the way next. Stay with us.
It's time to get your morning started with the news you need to know.
News update.
This is what's trending with DJ and PK. Hashtag NBA.
JJ Redick and Cole and Team USA. And I remember Cole couldn't stand JJ Redick. So he coming to practice. I hope somebody vouch for me on this story. I swear to God. And if everybody who's on that, they know. People know. They might have their own version, but people know. The moral of the story is Cole took it personal against JJ Redick in practice because he got tired of Coach K kept talking about JJ Redick, right? Cole took it very, very personal to the point where he was running through screens in practice. He was denying JJ the ball. He was fouling the out JJ. I'm like, damn, why are you treating a young boy like that? I'm like, what's the problem?
That's exactly how he was.
What's the problem? Oh, Coach K keep talking about this. He come up here to do something. This. I'm gonna show you today. This. Let JJ Redick score.
That's Carmelo Anthony talking about the 2018 USA camp beef that Kobe Bryant had with JJ Redick. When you have the drive to be the best, and a coach the stature of Coach K starts saying, "This guy's awesome." No, it's Kobe's drive. It's what separates champions from others. So he went out to crush him. And that story is the same as MJ and Scottie Pippen in the 10-part documentary, The Last Dance, and they spelled out exactly why they went out and destroyed their future teammate, Tony Kukoc. Because this guy over here, the GM, Jerry Krause, they didn't like, started talking about, he's the man. Jordan with the drive, I'm a champion. He can't even get a shot off. I'm the champ.
Kobe was a 12-year vet, a 3-time champion, and Redick at that point was a 2-year player.
And Mike Krzyzewski was a legend.
Exactly.
And who wanted to be the teacher's pet. Krzyzewski is awesome, and he knows awesome hoops. And he's talking about JJ, he ought to be talking about me. I will deny every pass. I will cut off every drive. I will block every shot until Coach is talking about me because I'm the man. And we can all laugh, and it's hilarious. But why does Kobe have 5 titles, and why does Jordan have 6? Because that's exactly how they were wired. And we can sit here and do draft analysis forever, and basically I'm all for that. But until you know if a guy has that drive, how do you know who's really the better player? I do want to know how tall a guy is. I do want to know how far the reach is. A 7-footer can just stick out his arms, and the passing lanes get smaller. And the ability to launch a shot gets smaller. Or in the case of Kevin Durant, your ability, or Dirk Nowitzki as a 7-footer, your ability, the window to get off a shot is always open. And I do want to know that stuff. But at some point, you got to have what Kobe had, and you got to have what Jordan had. I'm the best, and I'm going to prove it on every possession. How come Carmelo Anthony won, I think 4 playoff series with the Knicks and the Nuggets? Maybe 3? It's like 3, 4, or 5. It's a really small number of playoff series he won. When he was really talented. I mean, we knew it at college. He won a national championship at Syracuse. And he finds the story entertaining and hilarious, and he had to have it explained to him because he wasn't wired like that. It doesn't make him a bad guy. Well, it does if you're a big-time Knicks fan and you put all your hopes on him and then he doesn't deliver. But, I mean, it doesn't make him a bad person. He's not wired like that. But if you want to win championships, you need somebody who's wired like that. And you have to put up with some of the nonsense that comes with being wired like that. I mean, Jordan losing his cool and punching Steve Kerr in the face, not great. Kobe getting in a beef with Shaq because he looked at Shaq and said, I'm the man, because he was wired like that. He should have said, I'm going to feed Shaq until he eats his way out of the league, and by then I'll have 6 titles, and then Jerry West will get me somebody else, or Mitch Kupchak, and maybe I'll be the guy who challenges Russell. I don't know if he could have gotten to 11. But he could have gotten to 8. That doesn't take much imagination. It is a hilarious story. I enjoy hearing that stuff, but I do think that's how Kobe and MJ are wired, and most people aren't wired like that, which is what makes it a great story. And now J.J. Redick will coach the Lakers. $8 million on a 4-year deal. Poll questions already up. Twitter, David DJ James. How many full seasons does Redick coach in L.A.? 1, 2, 3? 4+? He finishes the deal and he gets another one? I don't think many are going to vote for 4+. I'm intrigued. I think the answer is going to be 1 or 2. A third full season? I mean, the Lakers are just going through coaches left and right. They don't know what they want. 8 coaches since Phil Jackson left 2011, so that's 13 years. The average coach doesn't make it 2 years. And this is what the Lakers did after Pat Riley, before Phil Jackson. They were flying through coaches. They just fired a coach who was there 2 years, and he took him to the Western Finals. Yeah, they fired Del Harris, too. How long was he there? Did he get to the Western Finals? Yes, he did. Del might have done 3 years. Might only done 2, though. I have to look that one up. It's what the Lakers do. They have really, really high expectations. Right now, they don't know how to meet them. And so they eat their own. But Reddick gets paid. And I get why you take the job. You're going to be the guy who fixes it. And don't you want to be in there? Most coaches don't win a championship. You're paid. You're doing what you love. You'd rather be playing in the league, but, man, Father Time's undefeated. J.J. Reddick had a long career. This gets him as close to the court as he can get. Bulls traded Alex Caruso to the Oklahoma City Thunder for Josh Giddey. I like it. I don't know that they'll win a championship, but they got a guy who shoots the 3 better. They've got a guy who can impact the game without the ball being in his hands a lot, because he will defend, he will rebound, he can pass. Averages 3.5. He's not a point guard, but he averages 3.5 assists per game. Averages almost 4 boards. He's a good glue guy. He's a poor man's Derek White. White could score it a little better, I think. Caruso just averaged 10 points a game for the first time in his career, but he shot 41% from 3. SGA can still have the ball. Giddey, the 3-point shooting is improving. It's not good enough, and why bet on a guy if you're the Thunder? He's been in the league 3 years. How much better will he get in the next 2 or 3 years? Caruso's been in 31 playoff games. He's got some experience, mostly with the Lakers in the bubble, I think 2/3 of those games. But nonetheless, they'll bet on Caruso. And I think just signals what everyone anticipated with the Bulls. The old guys are out. They got a bunch of guys who are 30, 33, 34. Caruso's 30. So the Bulls are starting again, it looks like. I mean, this is just one move, but DeRozan's 34 and a free agent. That's going to be a second move when he goes somewhere else. There are reports that the Jazz are going to help the Bills rebuild. Maybe try to get Zach LaVine. They're not the only team trying to get Zach LaVine. And I doubt they want to give up much for him. Will it be a little bit like Collins? Move him, see if you can play him, get him healthy, get a big year out of him, and move him for somebody else? I don't think any of these are the move, but are they the move that leads to the move? Only time will tell. Reports say the Philadelphia 76ers' interest in Paul George has significantly waned, despite team president Daryl Morey saying the team wants to add a high-level wing player to their roster. Paul George would seem to be a high-level wing player. Has James Harden ruined that deal? Paul, that bleeping bleeper? I mean,
Daryl Morey is a bleep.
If you want to bleep it up, go bleep in there, but I bleep in left, and bleep, 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 here's why. Harden was not happy. And now he's in George's ear. DJ PK.
Hashtag college basketball.
The NCAA has presented a plan to Division I conference commissioners that would expand the men's and women's basketball tournaments by 4 or 8 teams to 72 or 76 teams, alongside an option to leave each field at 68. The expectation is the expansion of the NCAA tournament field will occur. Now, your question is, why would they expand the tournament? What is the answer to all of your questions, Jake? It's one word.
Money.
There it is. Will the networks take these games and televise them? Yes. Will they pay more?
110%.
Yes. What's interesting is in the law of unintended consequences, which we should remember as conferences realign and as the football playoff changes, the law of unintended consequences. When this started, the reason was like the WAC split and the Mountain West wanted an extra NCAA bid, and the power leagues are like, all you little leagues, you're taking away our large bids. We're not going to make as much money. We're going to have these play-in games. That's what they were labeled. Play-in games. We'll go from 64 to 68. And then the other leagues say, whoa. You're not going to make us play each other and knock each other out. And so there was a whole negotiation back and forth. And so now we have 2 play-in games that match champions from smaller leagues. And we have 2 play-in games that match large teams. And over time, in the law of unintended consequences, people are like, hey, wait a minute. I'm a 16 seed here in the tiny little athletic conference. And in the tiny little athletic conference, this is our chance to win and get a second payday. We get paid for playing on Tuesday, but we get another unit of NCAA tournament money for playing on Thursday. That's more money. So now, the last time when they started this, the fight was over who has to play in these games. Now, because they realize this is a chance to get an extra check, who gets to play in these games? Don't be surprised if all the champions end up going into the field, and if all the power conferences, and by all I mean the SEC and the Big Ten, to a lesser degree the ACC, the Big 12, and the Big East, but mostly I mean the SEC and the Big Ten, are like, no, we want bonus bids and bonus paydays. We'll play the extra game. And honestly, where this is going, and they're not going to sprint to it, we're just going to slowly evolve over time, but we know where we're going. We know the NFL is going to add an 18th game, and we know that one day this NCAA tournament is going to be 96 teams because that's semi-symmetrical. It's more paydays, and they'll have 24 seeds playing 9 seeds, and those games will be competitive. And the winner will play the 8 seed. That's where they're going one day, but first, along the way, we'll be at 72 or 76. Just like we knew one day there'd be a BCS, and then we knew one day there'd be a 14 playoff, and now there's 12, and one day it's going to be 16. But right now it's 12. DJ and PK.
#NFL.
Being a starting quarterback in this league is a big responsibility, and the team goes as you go, and I know that, and that's a big responsibility. So I'm not going to add any pressure to myself just based on getting this contract. It doesn't really change what I expect of myself and what the team expects of me. I mean, whether this got done or not, Mr. Khan, Trent, Doug, everyone, all the coaches expect me to play well and to bring a championship here eventually. So I know that's the end goal, and that's what I'm here for.
I think I've heard that somewhere before. I put the most pressure on me. When I hear that, it falls into 3 groups. There's one group, you're going to face a ton of pressure and you're going to feel it and it's going to affect how you play. There's another group, there's a ton of pressure and you know it, but it's not going to affect how you play. You're going to win. Patrick Mahomes, Tom Brady, we know who those guys are. And there's another group who says that and just was never going to do it anyway and melts down right from the first second, and it just goes sideways and it never looks good. And right now, Deshaun Watson's in that cast of characters. He got all that guaranteed money in Cleveland. It's not going well. They actually did better when he was out. It's just it's a complete mess. Trevor Lawrence has matched Joe Burrow with the biggest NFL deal annually. And then I guess the other storyline here is this is going to keep going up, and you're only the guy carrying that contract for a little while, and then C.J. Stroud and Brock Purdy and I don't know, whatever other young quarterback I'm forgetting right now will sign a bigger deal, and they'll be at $65 or $70 million per year, and the spotlight won't be on you because you'll be the 7th best paid quarterback. And some people will just roll with that, and other people will lose their minds and want to be number 1. And the truth is, he's a number 1 pick, and he is expected to take them to the playoffs in the Super Bowl. And he's taken them to the playoffs once and won a game, and he's just getting started, so we'll see how it plays out. Patriots signed running back Ramondre Stevenson to a 4-year extension worth $36 million, $17 million guaranteed. I know running backs don't make the same kind of money, but $17 million guaranteed, even after you lose half of it to taxes.
That's a significant investment.
That is a really, really good contract. If somebody offers me that, Jake, I'm going to leave here, and you're going to have to do the show.
Okay.
Just if a $70 million guaranteed offer comes in between now and 10 o'clock, I probably won't finish the show.
Same here.
I'll just have to run around there. Just give me the wave. I'll run around and try to remember how to run a board. I did back in the day. It's changed a little, but not a lot.
Not a ton.
Cleveland Browns reserve defensive end Lonnie Phelps was charged with drunken driving after police say he crashed his SUV into a Florida restaurant. He was taken into custody after refusing to cooperate with officers on the scene of the accident that left his car wedged into the side of the building. Damage estimated around $300,000. Phelps was waived in the aftermath of the incident after being a practice squad player. You can't do that if you're a star without consequences. And if you're a role guy, the consequence will be you're no longer a role guy. DJ and PK.
Hashtag Major League Baseball.
Brennan awaits the 2-2 offering. A swing and a drive. Deep right field. Away back. Gone. Will Brennan with a multi-homer game.
2 on, 2 outs. The 1-2 pitch drilled out to right field. Juan Soto on the warning track. Will it be deep enough? You bet it will. In opposite field. Weaver for Anthony Santander. It's a 3-run shot. Take that, bleacher creatures.
Pitch number 7 on the way, and Cronenworth swings, hits it in the air to deep right field. Way back. Gonna go! For the 3rd consecutive game here at Petco Park, the Padres hit a walk-off home run.
Highlights from around Major League Baseball. The Padres walking it off. They pick up the W. They have just been loitering around 500. That was Jake Cronenworth beating the Brewers 7-6, the final score. You also heard the Orioles 17 runs on 19 hits. Santander goes deep. The Yankees get beat 17-5. Some of the stats they track. I might have a reputation as stats guy. They blow my mind, and I'm into this stuff. Okay, the Baltimore scored its 2nd most runs in the Bronx. They had 18 runs in a game back in 1986. I'm not surprised they tracked that. It's the most runs the Yankees have allowed since 2019 when they gave up 19 to Cleveland. I'm not surprised by that either. Once the game's out of hand, the position player, some random outfielder or whatever, first baseman goes out there and pitches, and who knows how many runs you give up. It doesn't matter. Once you've lost, you've lost. Save the bullpen for another game. The Orioles have won their 22nd straight series against an AL East opponent, surpassing the mark set by the Braves, the Brewers, and the Reds. Okay. I had no idea. Now you're keeping stats. Never even occurred to me. The story of the night, I think without question, you've got to look at what happened, and baseball's getting very good at doing this, at Rickwood Field. Oldest ballpark. It's over 100 years old, home to minor league games, home to Negro League games. It's got a long history. It's been refurbished, and they went and played a game there. And it's a little bit along the tones of going to Iowa, right? We're going to go somewhere we don't go. We're going to go to a non-major league stadium, and we're going to make it an event in a long season. I love that concept. They're good at it. I can't wait to see what they come up with next because I assume there's going to be a next because they've gotten every one of these right. The most powerful part of the night, they bring in Reggie Jackson, who played there, and Reggie tells the stories of what he had to put up with, and you just get really quiet and listen, because for a lot of us, it's just not in our frame of reference. And he was listing specific people, John McNamara, who gets blamed for leaving Buckner in. It was McNamara, right, who left Buckner in at first base?
I believe you're correct, yeah.
Yeah, and he shouldn't have been there to make the error for the Red Sox that opened the door in 86. Yeah, okay, but that's baseball. This is real life. And Reggie Jackson is recalling obviously painful memories of a really difficult time and how badly he was treated, how he was threatened, and he's talking about a teammate let him crash in the apartment, and it was, if you stay there, we're going to burn the apartment down. The hatred and the racism was that bad. And, I mean, to Fox's credit, they let him tell the story, and they just let him go. That it's unusual. Everything's timed out. It may look like it's not orchestrated, but it usually is. The chaos on TNT is well orchestrated. They come up with graphics too quickly. It's very well orchestrated. They just let him go. It was a heck of a story. It was really powerful. And he was calling out the names of teammates who helped him through that tough time. Names from my childhood. I hadn't thought of Joe Rudy in a long time. Left field for the A's in the 70s when they won 3 in a row. But in the 60s, a friend for Reggie Jackson when he really needed it. And when Jackson was talking about, I needed all those people because he would have fought somebody. He would have beat somebody's butt. Yeah, right. And then he thinks he would have been, he said, hanging from an oak tree. And I don't think he was kidding. Other people laughed nervously.
Yeah,
I thought. Other people thought they laughed inappropriately. I guess we all have our own take, but whatever it was. But Reggie, I thought, was 100% serious. That's how he remembers it. That's how he still feels decades later. Wow. They did other cool things, not nearly as important as that. I thought the half inning they did where they showed what baseball was like, I was having flashbacks on those graphics. And there was no camera in center field, and they couldn't remember when the center field camera was introduced, which I think was probably mid-'70s before someone put a camera out there in center field. It was crazy. It was cool. Now, where do they go next? What do they do next? Back to Iowa, maybe? For the movie set or somewhere else? There's somebody working on it because I think those things do well. I think when the ratings come out, it'll do well.
Salt Lake City to play on the Sandlot. Come on now, let's go.
Sandlot's a little too small.
I know.
Good idea, though. I like the way you're thinking. The Bees beat the Aces 7-3. Same two teams tonight at 6:30. Tony Parks on the zone with the call tonight. DJ and PK.
#RSL.
Soccer tonight, the Utah Royals take on the Orlando Pride. First kick at 6 o'clock. You'll hear it on 1280 The Zone starting at 5:30. Real Salt Lake plays tomorrow night. They host the LA Galaxy. That's first place RSL against the second place Galaxy. Galaxy are tied with the other LA team, LAFC, for second. America First Field tomorrow night. First kick at 7:30. Both teams will be playing for the third time in 8 days. Both teams are missing players to injury. RSL will be missing Brian Vera to suspension. And Pablo Mastroeni will come on and talk about the, against his better judgment and his wishes, the 15-game unbeaten streak, which is RSL's longest ever and is tied for the second longest in MLS history. If RSL can get a result at home against the Galaxy with both teams shorthanded, I do not know what the lineups are going to look like, then they'll have all alone at 16. The record's 19. And Pablo will be here later this morning. We'll talk with him at 8:30. DJ and PK.
#NHL.
The Edmonton Oilers look to force a Game 7 in the Stanley Cup Final. Game 6 tonight in Edmonton. Packed house, adrenaline. Can they pull off the miracle? When you win Game 4, you're just avoiding the sweep. When you're winning Game 5, you're surprising people and beating the odds. Game 6 is the first time they're really taking it seriously. Like, I don't think they're going to do it, but maybe they actually are going to do it. 4 in a row, come back from a 3-0 deficit. It's happened in hockey. It hasn't happened in the NBA. It's happened one time in baseball. Can the Oilers do it in the Stanley Cup Final? I think most people still think the answer is no. People are definitely going to tune in and pay attention to find out, hey, maybe. I'll bet most people put the odds around 20%. But it could happen, as Thurl likes to say.
One other note, Utah Hockey Club has officially announced their preseason slate starting September 22nd. Out in Iowa, of all places.
1 week from tonight, the draft party.
Correct.
For the NHL.
And then they have the prospects camp July 1st to the 5th.
So they bring in their AHL minor leaguers and their draft picks. And this is the rough equivalent of a summer league, I guess.
It's like NHL summer league, yeah.
DJ and PK, that is what is trending. The headline's brought to you by Shamrock Plumbing. There's no job too big or too small. Get the personal touch with Shamrock Plumbing. David Locke, radio voice of the Jazz, coming up at 8 o'clock. Get his take on the Caruso trade to Oklahoma City. Was it a good trade for Oklahoma City? Was it a great trade? Am I missing something and it was a huge blunder? I don't think I'm missing something. David Locke will join us at 8. Pablo Mastroeni from RSL, the head coach at 8:30. Corey Pronman, senior NHL prospects writer and analyst for The Athletic, coming up at 9 o'clock. When we come back, the question of the day. Stay with us.
Accessing.
This is Hans Olsen and Scotty G.
Owner of the Utah Jazz, Real Salt Lake, and the new NHL team here in Utah. It is Ryan Smith.
First, congrats on 10 years, guys.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
It's a long journey together, especially in a world where with media, there's so much disruption going on and everything's changing. I mean, we're seeing in the NBA, I'm on the media committee, and it's a new world. And so for you guys to be able to get 10 years under your belt and hopefully go a lot longer is pretty special. You're doing something right.
And, it is kind of like a marriage, Ryan. You
sit here on air and you pour your heart out to each other, and then I get home and I'm so tired of talking. My wife's like, "You talk to Scotty more than you talk to me." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's all right. I don't hug Scotty like this, so it's different."
Catch Hans and Scotty weekdays from noon to 3 on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
DJ and PK, don't miss your chance to win big every week on the Zone. This week on Win Tickets Wednesday, which I guess by that I mean next week. But in the coming Wednesday, you can win a pair of tickets to see Kevin James live at the Delta Center on June 29th. Listen all day for your chance to win. Every show will have tickets. I know what I told you before the break. I lied. No, not exactly. I told the truth as I know it, but we're calling an audible. Pablo Mastroeni needs to go a little early today, so we're going to talk to him right now. Pablo Mastroeni, RSL head coach, joining us. Pablo, good morning.
Morning, DJ. How you doing, bud?
Doing well this morning. How are you? Because honestly, I thought you looked a little fried and beaten down in the postgame in Kansas City. You won, but you looked exhausted, spent.
Yeah, no, it's so funny because sometimes, the game plan goes a little bit awry, but the guys still find a way to do it. I don't think it was our most comprehensive performance from just on all sides of the ball. And the biggest part, DJ, I think for me was really controlling the game and dictating the pace of the game. And, as I got to thinking about it is, I don't have to go on the field after traveling to Montreal and back, and then going from here and then going to Kansas City and playing in a steam room. And so I understand. And then on top of that, there's probably five changes to the lineup. And so, after deep reflection, I think it was it's unbelievable that we got the 3 points given all the different circumstances, and really some really quality finishing to see us through. But coming back home now, hopefully we get some rested legs, and just want to see a more, dominant, complete performance against LA.
For people who don't know, and by the way, congratulations on dodging that question. You turned it into the team. It isn't about you, and I realize I will relentlessly push for that answer, and you're just not going to give it. So I'm going to move on. You were a defensive midfielder. You played Kyle Beckerman's position. You actually played with Kyle, and so it's a position that Meccanelli and Brian Ojeda are playing for you. A little different over the generations, but it's the same. So, and for people who don't know, you played this position at a high level. You were a captain. You won an MLS title, and you played in 2 World Cups. So you did this at a really high level. Now, in any one game, I get it. Things happen, and so it ended up 4-3. It did. But if you go bigger picture on the season, the club gave up just 11 goals in the first 13 games. That is a team made in your image. You enjoy that. You enjoy coaching that. You want to coach that. You think that's the winning path, and you had the guys playing that way. Now, over the last 6 games, you've also given up 11 goals. That is not the way you want to play. I think that drives you nuts. But you're very careful about how you coach a negative in public. So for anybody who's trying to raise a kid or coach a team of 8-year-olds in any sport, how do you address a negative that has to be addressed because this is not winning soccer long term, but you do it in a positive way so you don't beat everybody down?
Right.
How do you juggle that? Because, yes, you drew 3-3 in Dallas, and it was great because you scored late goals to get a point on the road. And you won in Kansas City 4-3, and you beat Colorado at home 5-3. But those aren't all road games in heat, and it's a little bit of a trend. So what do you do?
Yeah, no, I think that's actually a really great question. And, I think it's all about what end are you trying to achieve, right? So if it's the way I see the game and it's about me, I'll never be able to communicate that in a way that touches the hearts and the minds of the players, right? So it's really about the team, and that's why I always go back to the team because they're a part of it, and they are the workforce, right? They are the people that make the decisions and execute in real time between the lines. And so it's just really about connecting the big picture, which is we want to be champs, right? And there's all these adages and sayings in sport for a reason. And the one that I always live by is that offense will win you games, but defense will win you championships. And that's proven in every sport. And the reason for that, DJ, and the reason I believe anyways, is because offense can be done, especially in soccer. You can have one guy that's hot and score a bunch of goals. You can have one guy that's making plays. But it takes the collective to keep the other team out of the goal. And that starts with the guys up front, and it goes through the midfield, and it goes to the guys in the back. And so when I speak about things that we want to correct, it always goes back to what we want to achieve as a team, which is to win a championship. And I'll bring up that point this morning as we do a quick recap and prepare for LA. But it's really about, every game has its own events, right? So like you said, the Colorado game we almost shot ourselves in the foot with the decisions that we made where we conceded the goals. The Dallas game was really similar. But what I focus in on in those moments, because you can no longer affect the goals that have gone in, is how do we respond? And so, I think it's more art than science, but I think it all starts with connecting with the players and understanding what they're going through and their empathy and having empathy with the plight that traveling across to Canada, coming back, then going to Kansas City. I mean, it's easy for us that don't drop a bead of sweat. It's a different thing when you're running 90 minutes in these conditions and getting results and keeping this thing moving. And so, the guys have been fantastic, and it's about really fine-tuning some things. And more importantly, this point of the season is having a real clear understanding between being the hunter and now being the hunted, where we're going to get everyone's best game. And understanding how to process that emotionally, but also executing that tactically on the field.
This 15-game unbeaten streak is amazing. It's the longest in club history. It's tied for the second longest in the history of a league. So in a quarter of a century of soccer, if you do something that's only been done a handful of times and only been done once at a higher clip, and that was Dallas did 19 in a row a few years ago, you've really accomplished something. So people should appreciate that, even though it's not the trophy you want to hoist. And I look and I'm trying to figure out, why does this happen, right? And people appreciate the way Chicho is scoring. I think they appreciate the way Gomez is scoring and creating, and Chicho's creating too. So they appreciate some of the other guys. But there's one guy, and there's one crazy stat I want to bring to your attention, and then explain to the people why this guy is so important. And right now you probably think I'm talking about a Meccanelli, because I just realized I was describing a Meccanelli, but that's not what I'm talking about. Catranas, in the 3 games you've lost this year, at Miami in the opener, he wasn't with the team yet because of visa issues and coming over from Europe. In New Mexico, when you lost in the Open Cup, he didn't play because you were resting guys a lot of games in a row, and so that was the game he had off. And then in the loss to Colorado, and those are the only 3 games you lost all year, he played 8 minutes as a sub. Right at the end of the game, it was already 2-1, and you lost 2-1. How? Now, part of this is timing and good fortune. Maybe if he'd been there in Miami, they would have lost a game. But you haven't lost with him on the field, basically. And when he's not on the field, bad things happen. So why is he so important, and why is he one more piece of the puzzle that the 21,000 or whatever who show up Saturday night should look at Catranas on the left side and think, this guy is a big piece of the puzzle? What is he doing?
That's interesting. From a scientific perspective or a data perspective, had we lost more games, then I think it would be there's been 3 games that he hasn't participated in, and maybe you have something there. But I look at it more, I can go back to those games and look for more bigger picture perspectives as to why we lost it, and not so much on just an individual. Because again, he's been awesome on both sides of the ball since he's gotten here. And he's having a really long season as well, not having a break in the winter. He's played through that, so he hasn't had an off season. So making sure that he gets rested and he's available for the remaining of the season for us is really important, and that's some of the decisions behind resting a guy like Alex along with the different games. But I think that what Alex brings from an attacking perspective, he makes great decisions in the attack. He gets really high in the attack, has a couple goals, couple assists, which aren't requisites for that position. Those are really the icing on the cake for us, and he's been able to do that. I think his mentality is top level, where he is a big time competitor. So anyone going against him is going to get a fighter, is going to get a guy that's never going to back down from a mentality perspective. And defensively, he's got the hardest position on the field, where he's got to get up to the highest line and also recover to the back line. And so physically, he's just a monster. And so I think some of those things will attribute themselves to his really, really good performances this year. And as far as, the wins and losses with him and not on the field, that's an interesting one. And, I'll have to dig into that to see, but it's really interesting that you brought that up.
I think that just to psychoanalyze my own question, and you can tell me how wrong I am. Or maybe grab the kernel of truth and dismiss the other stuff that's just kind of noise around it. I think that stat is a little fluky, and there will be Garth Lagerwey, when he was here, used to use the phrase regression to the norm on a regular basis. I think that will happen. So although it's a great stat now, I'm not convinced it'll be a great stat in 2 months. But I do think the kernel of truth is that it's what you said, and I think this is what people should appreciate when they watch the game. I could pull clips, and do this on TV, but on the radio, there are times where I've not only seen him run all the way back to defend and not jog. I see guys jog back to defend all the time. I mean run. And not only stay out wide, but tuck in front of the goal, because the trouble's at the other end of the field on the other side of the field, and he knows he's got to get in and help his goalkeeper. But I've also seen him get all the way to the end line and then play a cutback ball to Gomez for a goal in Chicago. And anybody who's willing to run that much and compete the way you talk about, and I think he's the second toughest, meanest guy on the team behind Brian Vera, that gives you a chance to win. And so while the sparkling, shiny stat is bound to go away eventually, the kernel of truth is you're better with him on the field than without him, because he works from end line to end line, and because he works from sideline all the way to the middle of the field. And if you have 11 guys who play like that, you're going to end up being a really good team.
A good chance. Yeah. No, you're spot on. I see what you did, DJ. You asked the question so you can give the right answer, because I don't know, spot on with that.
But I didn't know for sure it was the right answer.
No, I think you're absolutely right. No, I think, again, when you have 11 guys that are willing to work that hard for the team, and it goes back to the defensive, the question you asked about defense. When 11 guys are dialed in and they're willing to do that kind of work, you get the first part of the season where we give up 11 goals, right? And then you get caught in this narrative where, we have so many players having their best individual years. And so what I'm constantly thinking about and trying to kind of, temper is this regression to the I versus the team when you're having a good year, and making sure that everyone understands if everyone pulls their weight, not only can we have great individual performances and accolades at the end of the year, but with that comes great team performances and possibly a trophy.
The flaw, and this is where I thought you might shoot down my argument, as much as I appreciate Katranis and all of that, and by the way, it's regression to the mean is what Garth said, not regression to the norm. I messed that one up. But I think with the summer transfer window going, when it comes up here and you got a chance to add to the club, you can win a lot with guys who play the way Katranis plays. And other guys play that way. I put the spotlight on him. I think Macanelli plays that way. We could go down a list of guys. But to win at the highest level and to win the trophies, I don't think we're at the point in Major League Soccer history where that alone gets it done.
Right.
There's so much talent in the league that ownership has to spend to get elite players. I mean, you spend a lot of money to get Chicho. You spend a pretty good pile of cash to get Gomez, actually. And now look at the stats they're putting up. That's not just an accident.
Correct.
You got to have the quality and you got to have the work ethic. So if a team tries to moneyball its way to an MLS title, which some teams do and some teams don't, but mostly Seattle won and they spent big money, Atlanta won and they spent big money, LAFC won and they they brought Gareth Bale off the bench. Good grief.
Right.
To win a game, they gave up 3 goals. And by the way, sometimes even in the last game, you got to win that way. So really, you've got to spend to bring in more elite talent and still maintain the work ethic of someone who's trying to make the roster.
You're spot on, DJ. I think hard work alone isn't going to get you there. and talent alone isn't going to get you there. But you need talent that works hard, and that's what I've always, that's my philosophy as a coach. That's the reality of professional sports. I think if you try to, you can. I think the Moneyball idea works for a season, maybe two. I think you look at Philadelphia now. They're having a tough season, and the last 4 or 5 campaigns they've been really good. At the end of the day, you need guys that have special talent to put the balls in the net, and you need guys that have special talent to keep the ball out of the net, and you need special talent to bring the ball from the back line to the guys up front. So, the game is becoming it's becoming hyper-analyzed in a bunch of different ways, but at the end of the day, it's always going to be sport, which is, the Bulls aren't going to win unless they have a Michael Jordan. And they're not going to have a dynasty unless they have the Pippins and all these other guys around them as well, who were great players in their own right. And so, I think you can get away from it, but I think, like you rightly pointed out, this season is the proof is in the pudding, where, Gomez and Chicho have been involved in the majority of our goals this year, and they're both having what could be their best season in their careers. But that talent has to be there. And then why it's also important, DJ, is because of what it does to influence the rest of the guys on the field, right? Yeah. If, and I go to the basketball because I think everyone really understands it, but Michael Jordan brought the best out of everyone, right? And just being a player that has been, a role player on a team, when you have great players in front of you, your level of belief gets exponentially higher. Because that I can risk a little bit more, that I can be more brave, because even if we concede, we got a guy up front like Chicho that can score a goal, a guy like Andreas, a guy like Luna. So you can't do it without talent, and I think this window is a good opportunity to possibly pick up another attacking player, and possibly a defensive player as well, to really shore up the group, and then keep doing what we're doing. But talent is an absolute necessary if we want to compete for the title.
As far as this game, with Glad injured and Holt injured and Silva injured and Vera suspended, some combination of Oviedo, Hidalgo, and Philip Quinton, 2 of those 3 guys have to start at center back, right? That's all you got left now is 2 outside backs and a guy you acquired midseason.
That's it. And that's why, when you look at it from, you take a step back and you look at it, it happened when we went to Chicago as well. And we had Bodie and Hidalgo and Oviedo as center backs. Mm-hmm. And I think our ability to really, to adapt to what we have. And more importantly, everyone understands the game model, exactly what we want to do. And we go through this all the time. So making those changes, it's at least comforting to know that the players know exactly what's meant to be doing. The biggest problem is their lack of familiarity with that position and seeing reps in that position in real time. So you can coach it in training, and that's fine, but it's never going to be the same pressure. It's never going to be the same effort from the guys up front as it is on Saturday. And so that's where I often talk about mentality, which is it doesn't matter what life throws at you. How do we respond to it? And the guys have been great, but yeah, we're going to have to use either Quinton or Oviedo and Bodie in there for this weekend.
I know you don't really want to blurt out the starting lineup, but I just figured that left-footed Oviedo is going to be in there. You've pushed too hard on left-footed players on the left side of the field. I can't. You don't have to answer that, but I'm betting we're going to see Oviedo. We'll see when you run the 11 out. All right, Pablo, we got to run. I know you got to go too. We appreciate the time this morning, and massive crowd, big game with second place LA Galaxy tomorrow night. We'll enjoy it. We'll see you there.
Thanks, DJ. Appreciate it, bud.
Pablo Mastroeni, RSL head coach, joining us right here on The Zone. DJ and PK, it's 97.5 The Zone.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I present...
This is JJ and Alex.
Utah's not the only team that can say some of these things, that they've got, the strength coach, starting quarterback, the coordinators, and the head coach back. Iowa State, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, Texas Tech, Utah, West Virginia. That's a long list in the Big 12 of teams that have stability. And I'm going to bet on stability every time. And if you're a BYU fan who's wondering why are media down on us, because there's a little bit of an instability at the quarterback position. We saw it last year. It's got to be better. And once it's better, BYU will be taken seriously in the Big 12. But until then, you're going to start seeing stuff like the 16th best quarterback room in the Big 12. They're going to start picking you 12th out of 16 teams for the conference championship. So BYU's going to have to earn that.
Catch JJ and Alex afternoons from 3 to 6. Presented by G2G Bars on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
The band of the day is The Killers. Brandon Flowers celebrates his 43rd birthday, and it's brought to you by Live Nation. For all the live concerts and events in 2024, check out livenation.com. Pablo Mastroeni on Moneyball. You know, I think that Moneyball gets misdefined because the A's were trying to win with no money. They were trying to win with no money at all. And they did. They got to the playoffs. But then when they got to the playoffs, they ran into teams that had money. They were playing all the angles, plus they had the top-end talent. And then that was the difference, and the A's got knocked out. I think Moneyball, and I think this matters to every team in the salary cap league. So it doesn't matter, Jazz, Utah Hockey Club, RSL, whatever. You need the 70 to 80% of the roster to be really inexpensive and play at a high level. And then for the people who are expensive when you're playing Moneyball, you need to bring in the $2 to $3 million player like Andres Gomez and turn him into the $5 or $10 million player, which I think is what we're watching happen right in front of us. More on this with David Locke next. Stay with us. David Locke's weekly interview brought to you by the Murdoch Auto Team. David, good morning.
David James, my week is complete. My summer gets better because I get to talk to you every Friday morning back in our regular time. So good. Do you have that other guy with you today? What's his name again?
I believe you know his name, and I believe you're tempting fate right now, but, you know, you do you. When you want to play with fire, go ahead.
Patrick Kinahan.
I
missed you. I missed you.
He's on vacation. He'll be back. He'll be back.
Oh.
No worries.
Oh, he's not there. Still. Wow. Is it coincidental that he takes vacation every Friday and I'm supposed to be on the show?
It is. It is. They got a very good vacation provided by a friend, and they just need to say yes at the right time. And if Fred says Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, it's Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. David, the Chicago Bulls just made a trade to bring in Alex Caruso. The Jazz may be bringing, well, they've been mentioned, I don't know if they'll do it or not, to bring in Zach LaVine. It looks like the Bulls are blowing things up. They really haven't had very much success, and they got a bunch of guys who are in their 30s now, so you get why it might be time to move on. When you see the Caruso trade, what do you think it means for a LaVine deal and the Jazz? Please connect the dots and put it all together for us.
I mean, I think it's clear LaVine's going to be moved. I mean, they played, frankly, I think his time there has just come to an end, and I think everyone will be better off if he moves. Both Zach LaVine, who's really good, and Chicago, who I think is just, worn out. And then when they played much better after he got hurt last year was probably the finishing touch on that. He's the only thing is I would say he's a little bit of a damaged asset right now. Because of the fact that they played so much better after he got hurt last year, in addition to I think there's a question on whether his numbers are a little hollow. And his numbers are great, and his efficiency is incredible. And, I generally would believe in those two things. But I think that there is a question of if it's a bit hollow. From a Jazz standpoint, I mean, I kind of on a reoccurring theme on this with a lot of times when we ask about whether you trade for a player. Like I saw there was a report that someone said, well, the Jazz aren't looking for Zach LaVine type players. And I was kind of like, what? Like we talked about this all last year, but who's our second best player? And where do they rank in the NBA? So Lowry's probably a top 30 player in the NBA. Our second best player is maybe a top 80 player in the NBA.
Some people are in their cars screaming Jordan Clarkson. Others are yelling Colin Sexton. I don't know. Somebody else might be yelling somebody else. I don't know that there'd be.
So, I'd be curious. The Ringer, I think, just relaunched their top 100 NBA players.
They're only going to put one Jazz player in there, aren't they?
I think Colin probably makes the top 100 at this point. I don't think Jordan does anymore.
Okay.
And so, Zach LaVine's top 100 player in the NBA. So the idea that, we're not looking for those type of players seems really weird to me because he would be our second best player. If we traded for him tomorrow he's our second best player. This is the same way I feel about Trae Young. Like, you can tell me all the things you don't like about Trae Young. Great. He'd be our best player. Like, at some point, maybe it's not the piece that gets you to the championship.
Is it the piece that leads the piece?
Right. Yeah. You got to do that. Like, we're short on talent right now.
I guess the question is, from the Moneyball perspective, which means many things to many people, originally to the Oakland A's, it meant we only want to spend $1 million on a player, and that's our top deal. I think you need to take a little more nuanced look. Sure, for part of your roster, that's one way you have to look for it. But how do you get someone who outperforms the value of their contract? Because most good teams have that. And so if Levine's a $30 million player and a $40 million contract, I get why that gives an executive pause. But if he's been that and you can get more out of him and you get a damaged asset, that there's a Moneyball aspect to that. If you think you can revive the damaged asset.
Yeah, I'm going to take a different approach, and then I want you to end it really quickly if you think it's too geeky and really boring and people are going to fall asleep in their cars and we're going to have accidents all across I-15. And so the area where I would change that discussion is where are the places where you can actually make Moneyball impact. So I think they're on the very top and the very bottom.
Oh, I was going to say the bottom 70 to 80% of the roster. Okay, but go ahead and explain.
Well, because the max salary exists, if you actually get a true player who's one of the top 10, 12 players in the NBA, they're far exceeding their value of their contract.
Mm-hmm. You're right.
So that's the
you can't pay Michael. You can't pay Michael Jordan enough.
Right. You can't. Right. You can't pay Luka and Jokic and Giannis and Tatum now enough. Though they're going to. And then I think the bottom level is where you have a guy on a rookie scale contract who's performing, or like the Bulls actually had a little bit of that. I think people believe Alex Caruso was probably delivering more than his contract at the time. His new contract with the Thunder, he gets an extension. I'm not sure that'll be true. Now I think he's probably overvalued. But on Zach LaVine, certainly, hey, if you can get him to play better, and then he gets closer to his contract value. I do also think there's some areas where you just can't play Moneyball, right? The way the rules work, there's certain salary structures where you're just going to be paying, you're overpaying a little bit for those players. But yeah, I think so. I don't know that I think Zach LaVine's an area where you really win Moneyball. I also think the other one we have to just kind of wrap our head around here is $10 million a year is your 10th guy who kind of plays. $20 million a year is a rotation player. $30 million a year is a starter. $40 million a year is a high-end starter, and $50 million a year is a star. That's oversimplifying it, but that's our salary structure now. So what's Zach LaVine's deal? For 40?
He's at 4. He was just at 40. He's going to get 43 next year, 46, and then he's got an option year at 49. But
okay, it's a little high,
right?
But it's not if he plays a little defense and does some of the things he's didn't do as well in Chicago, then he's a high level starter. He averages 22 points a game. He's close to a 50, 40, 90 guy. That's not crazy.
Is anybody who signed for a long time a good value pickup this summer because in another year the network TV deal is going to triple, or if they sign a fourth deal with TNT, it's going to more than triple, and the salaries are about to go into the stratosphere? So anybody who gets signed in the current climate, it's a huge pile of money for LaVine. I mean, it's $40 million plus a year, right? This is awesome. Right. But is it going to be undervalued as soon as the new salary kicks in?
So I have to do what year the new salary kicks in, and none of the contracts are so much shorter now. But your theory is 100% right.
Well,
if someone really has 3 or 4 years left on a deal, the end of that deal is going to be just fine no matter what.
If they don't smooth the deal like they didn't do last time, which is why the Warriors were able to afford Durant, because the cap took a huge pop and suddenly they had money, Levine would play 2 years with a contract signed under the old cap, but he'd have 2 years with the money wildly inflated. He'd still be making $46 and $49 million, which, while it's a lifetime worth of money, to your point, our star's going to be getting $60 or $70 million.
Right. No, because I think starters are going to be $60 to $70 million, and stars are going to be $90.
And I don't know this. I haven't done the deep dive into this or talked to people who are smarter about this, but I've heard speculation that the $100 million player is on the way.
Yeah, right around the corner.
Oh my gosh! So at that point, at 40, awesome. Now he's got to be producing at age 30. That'll be his age 31 and 32 seasons.
Here's the other thing. Let's look at the Boston Celtics for a second.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Derek White.
Yep.
Derek White, plus size first position. Drew Holiday, positional size or plus. Jason Tatum, plus size at this position. Jaylen Brown, plus size at this position. Kristaps Porzingis, plus size at this position. Yeah. Luka Doncic, plus size first position. Kyrie Irving, not, but the most gifted offensive player in the world. Derek Jones, either his size position or plus size at his position. P.J. Washington, plus size or at his size position. Eric Lively, Daniel Gafford, plus size at their position. Zach LaVine, plus size at his position. I think if there's a signature to what Keontae George, plus size at his position, Taylor Hendricks, plus size at his position, I think you're going to see the number one, Lauri Markkanen, big-time plus size at his position.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're going to see a signature, I think, out of Danny Ainge and Justin Zanuck. It's going to be position. I would be very surprised if we make moves that don't match positional size.
Good.
It's the one reoccurring comment that has been said the whole time from them. And that gets very interesting on Wednesday because there are not a lot of players that are positional size appropriate for this draft.
Good. I'm all about it. Kevin O'Connor said when he came in, I want to make the team taller, longer, and more athletic. But and they did in some regards, right? Kirilenko was it, but they went out and got Okur and Boozer because they were the most talented guys available. D. Will was plus size at his position. Andre was, but the other guys weren't, and they were really good.
You want a great D. Will story?
In 1 second, I just want to finish that. They were really good until they ran into the Lakers, who were plus size all the way across the front line with 3 7-footers. And Kobe then is the shooting guard, plus size at his position, and they lost to those guys 3 times in 4 years.
Oh, they were so long. Lamar Odom.
Right,
so
Lamar Odom's the small forward at 7 feet. So now go ahead and hit me with the D. Will story.
In Carmel this week, my daughter was playing golf tournament, and I'm walking down the street, and I look inside this nice little restaurant to kind of look at it, and there's D. Will sitting there at the table.
Yeah.
It's like, hey.
It's good to be king. I want to go to Carmel this week.
It's pretty great. It's pretty funny. I'm like, hey, bud. My daughter was like, can we go? And I, pop into the restaurant. What are you doing? I was like, it's Darren. She's like, oh, okay.
Did Oklahoma City just really help themselves? I mean, the Jazz are a long way from worrying about who the top 4 teams in the Western Conference are. But did that trade, moving Giddey for Caruso, screams the future is now? You just traded a young player for an old player, but you traded a guy whose three-point percentage has gone 28, 32, 34. It's getting better, but it's still not good enough. It's getting better. Maybe he'll get there one day. But I just think they don't want to wait for one day. He obviously had an issue off the court that could have wrecked his career. And now you bring in a guy who can defend, who doesn't have to have the ball in his hand to impact the game, who's good in transition, and who's a career 38% three-point shooter and shot 41% last year. That just screams win now. And at $9 million, if you're playing Moneyball, I think he outperforms his salary. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
So they had to move Giddey. He didn't match. He didn't fit. And I do think this is a trouble that the Jazz could have along the way where, and I don't know if this was the case, but you get a guy like Giddey who's a really important part of the team, and then as your team evolves, he really becomes your 6th or 7th man. Well, he's probably not that interested in that, right? He was one of the primary ball handlers and things like that as your team evolves. That's going to be something the Jazz could have a problem with as we evolve. Guys that got the ball a lot suddenly become 6th or 7th men. Hey, whoa, that's not my deal. I'm a starter.
Right, and I get that, but isn't the answer, so we'll cross that bridge when we get to it?
Right, 100%, but
Thunder got to it, and they made the move.
Yeah, and then, I think that if you can't shoot, you can't play. Josh Giddey just can't shoot well enough, and he's really talented in every other way, but he really can't shoot well enough. And so again, as we go into this draft, like if you can't shoot, you can't play. Like, how many times do we need to look at this? Here's another top 5 pick that like can't shoot, can't play.
Okay, but you have to be a plus size guy, right? You got to either match your position size or be bigger, and you have to shoot it really well. And if the whole league holds on to these two things, there's a really limited number of guys who meet that description. And there's plenty of smart people who are like, well, that's what I need.
Yep. No, I mean, that's the difficulty. I think Giddey could be more valuable in Chicago if he has the ball in his hands. He really just becomes their point guard. But with Shea and Jalen, there's no role for him to do that there. He became an off-ball player, and then he's not a very good off-ball shooter, and teams aren't going to guard him, and so then his role just didn't fit as well there. So I think he could be he becomes their primary ball handler in Chicago. For Chicago to go get a 21-year-old who, I don't think that shot ever becomes something that's particularly viable. It just doesn't even look right. I think is a pretty good move in the sense that you're giving him a little bit of a different role. And, this goes back to like how Eric Spoelstra dealt with Dwayne Wade not being a great shooter when he had LeBron and he had Chris Bosh and all those other guys, was, well, if you put the ball in the hands of Dwayne Wade, then he has gravity. So if the ball is in the hands of Josh Giddey, then he has gravity and he can do things, and he's pretty good at that. If you need him to shoot, it's not going to be the greatest thing ever.
Do you have a couple of names to watch for you think the Jazz should draft, and will they have to trade up to get to these names?
So I do like Cody Williams of probably the most of anyone. He's right size. He's a little skinny, kind of shoot it, shows some little other aspects of his game that might make him better than what he is right now. They had a big 300-pound center that sat there the whole time that blocked everything. Not sure either of these guys are totally right size, but I think Devin Carter and Jared McCain will have NBA careers that have some length to them. I have some concerns on both of them, but I think they'll both have NBA careers. Late in the draft, I like Baylor Shireman and I like KJ Simpson, another Colorado kid. They both can shoot.
How many full seasons will J.J. Redick coach the Lakers? We have a poll question up. I'll tell you what the answer is. We're over 200 votes. I'll tell you what the answer for the public is. 7. 7. David.
He's going to get a second contract.
David. You're really going 7. That's your answer. You're not messing around. You're going to stick with that.
Yep. We'll get a second contract.
Did Phil Jackson go 7 years?
Maybe not, but at some point they have to stop this routine, and this is where they're going to do it.
Phil Jackson went 6 the second time.
And then quit. Yeah, I don't know if he's going to win titles or anything like that. I just think he's going to do fine with LeBron and AD, and then they're going to transition out of it, and he'll do fine with AD and whatever it is, and then they'll transition out of that, and he'll get a renewed contract, and he'll be fine.
Okay, there it is. Most people are going with 2.
Yeah,
2.
I figured.
2's the number. 7 puts him right in there in Pat Riley territory. It looks like Riley did 8.
Yeah, Darvin Ham probably still deserves to be the head coach, but so this is a little complicated. But I think J.J. Redick will check boxes.
The Darvin Ham's not the first time they fired a coach who got him to a Western Conference final. They expect titles. So he got the Del Harris treatment. He got the Del Harris treatment.
They're a long way from titles.
Yeah, I think we agree on that. I know you got to run, David. We appreciate the time.
Thank you. Okay, see you. Bye.
DJ and PK, it's 97.5 The Zone. Still to come this morning. NBA Draft Wednesday and Thursday. Draft Party Wednesday for the Utah Jazz. Draft Party Wednesday. Then the second round is Thursday afternoon. Then another draft party for the NHL Draft Friday. Corey Pronman, senior NHL prospects writer and analyst for The Athletic, joins us at 9 o'clock to look ahead to the Utah Hockey Club and what they might be doing. DJ and PK, it's 97.5 The Zone.
This is Jake Scott and Ben Anderson.
Well, what's the plan with the Jazz? Well, do you think that Brad Stevens could forecast the future that Milwaukee would make one of the more unintelligent trades in recent memory?
Here's the plan, everybody. Memphis is going to be so desperate to have a leader in the clubhouse, they're going to trade anything to get Marcus Smart. What we're going to do is in that Marcus Smart trade, we're going to get Kristaps and 2 additional draft picks, and then we're going to use those draft picks to get Drew Holiday. Now we just need to start planting guns on Ja Morant so it happens. There's no plan.
No, hey, we'll plant somebody in Ja Morant's orbit. We're putting this guy here in his English class.
We want him to go to a private school so he feels like he needs credibility. So he's got to be tough. We've figured it out. We've cracked the code.
Hear Jake Scott and Ben Anderson every day from 10 to noon on 97.5 The KSL Sports Zone.
Hot Takes or Toast brought to you by Siegfried & Jensen with 30 years of serving Utah. Brandon Flowers, 43 today. So we got the killers all morning long. Happy birthday, Brandon Flowers. Just had David Locke on. You can get it wherever you get your podcasts. Talked about the Moneyball, talked about rebuilding, Zach LaVine, or somebody like him. Somebody who's 29, about to be 30, making $40 million, and is only available because they're a damaged asset. I mean, if you're in that age bracket, if you're in your mid to late 20s and you're performing well, you're not available. It's not happening. Jaylen Brown's 27. He's a couple years younger. He's making $32 million. They just won the title. Not available. There was a time, there was the thought that maybe the Celtics to give up on it would be available. Well, then you got to pounce. I like what David said about you've got to have guys who are top 100 players. The Jazz have 1, maybe 2. And if they can get Markkanen signed now long-term and find some more guys who are about his age, can they push this forward? And I really think that's what Jazz fans want. I love to talk about the championship because everybody wants to win a championship. It's the one thing we haven't seen here. But they're so far away, it almost seems like a waste of time. Now, it should always be the goal, and always has to be out there. And you need the next big thing. And maybe San Antonio got him in Victor Wembanyama, and the Jazz blew it by not being terrible that year, and at least giving themselves the 14% chance to get there. And it doesn't look like there's a guy like that in this draft. But I would argue, did Tatum and Brown look like that? And now look at him. So maybe he's there and you got to figure it out. And we're going to spend the rest of this week and next week until Wednesday guessing who's the guy. And then after the draft, we'll still guess who's the guy. Because we're terrible at this game. Because the Joker was the guy, and we didn't know it. And Antetokounmpo was the guy, and we didn't know it. And as we sit here and talk, you do need to be able to shoot it, and you do need the measurables, and you do need to be plus size to your possession. But the story we had in the 7 o'clock hour, I just think that was so important. And you only get that if you get to do the interviews. We don't get that. What makes these guys tick? How badly do they want it? And the best want it really badly, and they work really hard, and they demand a lot of themselves. And we can't know that. We can watch all the clips we want on YouTube. It's better than when we couldn't. And now we can watch full games. And say something to Ben Anderson about clips sometime and watch his head explode. Clips! Everybody looks good in clips. It's true. All you see when you watch clips is what they're capable of when they're playing at their best. Now watch the full game and find out what they routinely do. But still, what's inside? How hard are people going to work? PK asked me once, what's the top shelf for Hendricks? Like Scottie Pippen. You're 6'9", and you move really well. Now, Pippen can do about 100 things that lead to a championship. I don't know if Hendricks is going to be able to do any of them. Can you shoot it? Pippen could shoot it. Can you handle a ball, pass, move the ball? And then the all Ron Boone test. Lots of guys can pass, but can you pass off the dribble? Once you're committed to driving the hoop and the defense rotates, are you the guy who clatters into somebody, draws the charge? You're just the bull in the china shop? Or are you quick and nimble enough and you stop and bang and you throw the ball to the open guy? Or you throw the ball away? Or you throw the ball and it gets picked off and it goes the other way for a dunk? Pippen had a drive. Now, sometimes he couldn't put his ego away, but for those championships he did. Now, he would only put his ego away for Jordan. He wouldn't put it away for Tony Kukoc. There's so many things. How good a rebounder are you? How hard do you play? I mean, Hendricks has so many questions to answer. But you can't be that guy if you don't have the size, and he's got the size. And you can't be that guy if you don't move well. And you got to have a little bit of a shot. I think his shot looks pretty good. It went in at a pretty good clip the first year. Now, he wasn't playing pressure games. He wasn't playing the best teams that were really well prepared to play him. And back to David's point about Kyrie Irving. The key guys in that NBA Finals series were all plus size. And the one guy who wasn't is wildly talented, but who had bad games. And why did he have them? I think Kyrie had bad games because the Celtics thought we need to make him the weak link. They can only beat us if those two guys go off. And we really can't do a lot about Luka going off. But we can put bigger guys on Kyrie. And if they make a switch, if Tatum's on him, then Brown's on him. And if he drives to the hoop, he sees Porzingis. He sees bigger people everywhere he goes. Have you ever played in a basketball game with bigger people? I went to an enormous state university. So we had a gazillion intramural basketball leagues. There was one league for guys who played in college. I needed to go nowhere near that league. I would have sucked. Everyone would look at me and go, you didn't play in college. You're right. You got me. And then there were multiple levels for high schools, and one of the leagues had a bunch of 6'6" guys. And I played. It was the B League. And I played in the B League one, and you know what I was? I was like the 8th best guy on the team. I was too short. I wasn't athletic enough. And then they had a C League for high school guys, and there was nobody over like 6'1" or 6'2" in that league. I was way better. Go out, put yourself in a pickup game. That's why they're talking about plus-size guys. And Kyrie found that out. Now, if you have somebody of Kyrie's talent and how many people are available, Dallas went and got him. He was a damaged asset. He rebuilt himself. They put him in a good situation. You know, Jason Kidd, his career line wasn't just a smooth graph constantly going up. He had ups and downs. Jason Kidd had major issues off the court. And so he gets how to work with someone who's going through major issues off the court. Kyrie had a different set of issues, but they were still issues. Jerry Sloan used to talk, you never know what's going on in a player's life. You never know. And so Jerry, over time, had his own issues, and other players had issues, but always knew to work with it. So if Jazz management and Ainge decide Levine's the guy, like last year they decided Collins is the guy, I think they're going to go out and get somebody. And whoever it is going to come in, and they're not going to be perfect because the players are perfect aren't going to be available. You're just going to have to roll with it because Locke's point, the Jazz don't have enough talent. They need more guys who are top 100 talent. And then we'll start talking about how do you get guys who are top 50 talent. And some of you will tweet at us, and you'll be right. Well, you can't win a title without one of the top 5 players in the NBA or without 2 of the top 10 players in the NBA. Look what the Celtics just did, right? Do they have one of the top 5? Do they have 2 of the top 10? Yeah, I think they do. And they won it. And the Jazz don't have their Tatum, their Brown, their Joker, Antetokounmpo, whoever. But maybe the only way they're going to get that guy is to trade 3 top 100 players to get him. And have 4 or 5 top 100 players on the roster and have a couple guys left when they get that guy. The cool thing is, no matter how much we talk to Ainge, and we don't talk to him very much, but when he does talk, he really does tell you stuff. And there isn't one path. Tanking for the draft is one path. Trading for distressed assets, guys who, for whatever reason, aren't quite spot on. They aren't quite there. Kristaps Porzingis, damaged asset. I don't understand exactly why Jrue Holiday was healthy and why the Celtics were able to get him. But the Jazz have to make those moves. And it goes back to the Moneyball thing. Pablo Mastroeni talked with us an hour ago when he was on. The whole try harder, work harder works to a point, but you got to have the high-end talent. So the Jazz have a bunch of guys who aren't high-end talent. Maybe they will be. Maybe if they really apply themselves and grind. That whole cliche, I worked 5 years to become an overnight success. When somebody blows up, we're like, wow, they've really taken off. Yeah, but what did they invest for 4 to 5 years to get there? Some of you love Keontae George. Some of you are pretty lukewarm on him. How hard is he working right now? We don't get to know that. Does he show up? The old Gordon Hayward quote, 7 a.m. every day. You're not going to be 19, 20, 21 forever. You got to get better. You're not always the next big thing. Hayward was the next big thing. I just looked it up. I was looking at Oklahoma City salaries. This is classic. And Hayward's coming off their books. They've got cap room. They can add guys. I mean, Caruso's only $10 million. I mean, Caruso only makes $1 or $2 million more than, I think it's $1 million. I think he makes $1 million more than Josh Giddey. So that was a nice move for them, but they've still got cap room to make a bigger move. They just got to figure out what the right one is. And it's because Hayward's coming off the cap, and he's 34 years old now. Now, I don't know about you, but it seems like 5 minutes ago that the Jazz were drafting him and Kevin O'Connor was getting booed. Shortly after that, Dennis Lindsay decided, I'm not going to go out there and announce draft picks. I'm not taking this. And that was the end of that tradition. It's why we can't have nice things. Too much booing. There's the draft, there's free agency, there's trades. The draft is a long-term play, and I think that they've had just about all the fun they can have in the lottery, and people want to win. So one of the paths forward, and Ainge says this, he just won't get nailed down that there's one plan and one path forward. We all think the free agent path is really unlikely. There just aren't many free agents, for starters, and then can you get them here? So that path, not very likely. The draft, all right, you can get a 19-year-old kid with a 10th pick in the draft, and maybe he'll hit. Maybe they'll trade up. I'm really intrigued by that. Trade up, trade back. Who do they love? Who do they really want? But the trade, and if it's not Zach LaVine, who else? Who else is going to be available? I do wonder if one path for the Jazz is getting wrecked. And this is where Ainge, you got to be opportunistic. It's why he doesn't get nailed down on one path. One path forward was find the team that doesn't want to pay the luxury tax, who's shedding talent, make a money deal, and get the talent because you got cap room. But with all this news coming out, and they know more than we do, whatever's come out publicly, the NBA owners know even more because there's stuff that hasn't come out yet. They know where the cap and the luxury tax are going, and I think teams might bite the bullet, grind through, and figure we're going to get cap relief from these new network TV deals. We don't need to go out and make the trade. That's going to hurt the Jazz. That's one option for Ainge that we thought he had 2 years ago that doesn't look like it's going to exist anymore. So, time to figure out something else. And the Bulls might not be the only team tearing things down. So, who's available? DJ and PK, it's 97.5 The Zone.
Accessing.
This is Hans Olsen and Scotty G.
Randy Rigby, former president of the Utah Jazz.
You know, one of the things I would hope our listeners would appreciate is great sports is done with great athletes, yes, but there's great people that are behind the scenes that make it come and make it so special. Steve Klauke was one of those people who made the games come alive and made you understand it and love it and appreciate it, and he will be sorely missed.
Catch Hans and Scotty weekdays from noon to 3 on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Nominate the youth sports volunteer you know for the Hercules Hero of the Week. Submit your nomination at kslsports.com/contest and listen every Thursday afternoon to JJ and Alex for the winner. Help us celebrate the efforts of those volunteers making an impact with the Hercules Hero of the Week, sponsored by Hercules Credit Union and Beehive Mills.
DJ PK, it's 97.5 The Zone. We're just talking about team building. You got to appreciate everyone who adds something to the group. And I think the challenge for a lot of players, because you're not Tatum and you're not Brown and you're not Luka, this is a small handful of people, and the Jazz definitely one of those people. But talking earlier with Pablo, it's like appreciating what everybody brings to the group, right? Chicho Arango and Andres Gomez are scoring a bunch of goals, and Diego Luna is threading these perfect passes, and it's easy to appreciate that. But how do you find one thing that adds something to the group? And I was talking to him about Katranis, because the way he attacks, the way he defends, it's like they're out there with 11.5 or 12 players because he runs so much. And I think every time the Jazz brings somebody in, we have to be careful not to dismiss them for what they can't do, but appreciate the one thing they're going to add to the group. Will Hardy says a lot of stuff, and some of it is just blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. Because coaches have to say stuff. There's a whole psychology with a group. And we got this poll question up. How long is Redick going to last for the Lakers, right? NBA coaches are on thin ice all the time. They got to be careful how they talk in public. So I can sit here and say, Will Hardy, yada, 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 blah, blah, blah. And if it were me up there, I'd be going, yada, 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 blah, 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 because it's the reality of the job, right? And you got to be careful what you say and when you say it and how you call somebody out. And the one thing Will says that I really appreciate is, what's this player's superpower? Now, that gets a little overstated, so you get tired of that hype. But, what's the one thing they add to the group? What can they do at a high level in the NBA or Major League Baseball or the NFL or whatever? We're talking NBA here. But what's the one thing they add to the group that the group needs? Peyton Pritchard. Now, is he like the 6th? No. 9th? 12th best athlete? Best player for the Celtics? But he found one thing the group needs, and it gets him on the court. At the end of quarters, and the Celtics make a big deal. How you end the quarter, everybody sits down, everybody looks up at the scoreboard. Pablo always comes in and talks about the psychology. It's such a big deal. We have Riley Jensen in. He talks about the psychology. And a quarter strong, and you break another team's will. We played really well in that quarter, and look, we're going to the fourth quarter, and we're down as many points as you're down at halftime. What happened? The Celtics were great. The Mavs would match them for 10 minutes, and then the Celtics would go on a 6-2 run, a 7-1 run, a 6-0 run to end a quarter. And one thing, because egos get in the way, one thing NBA players don't want to do, and to me it's the dumbest thing ever, and analytics should have fixed this, and it hasn't, but players don't want to take shots at the end of quarters. They don't want to do it, because it wrecks their shooting percentage. Why should I take a 40-footer against pressure? Peyton Pritchard's looking around thinking, man, Derek White's really good. They traded for Jrue Holiday? I thought I might play more. Nope. So how does he get on the court? Well, he takes the shots at the end of quarters nobody else wants to take, and he gets really good at them. And furthermore, all his teammates know he's really good at it, and none of them really want to do it themselves. And if you watch the highlight, and it's on YouTube, so you can go look at this, you go frame by frame. Give it the old Zapruder film treatment here. Watch him take the shot, and as the ball gets close to the hoop, when it's still like 20 feet in the air, and it's not, and you don't know if it's going in, but by then they pan the camera and you can see the Celtic bench because the shot went in. They were scoring in front of their bench. And so when you see the shot go in, before it goes in, but that last second as they're panning the camera, you can't see the bench when he takes the shot. But as it pans and follows the ball, you see the people on the bench, and they are jumping up and down. There are multiple guys bouncing on their toes. They're off their seats. They're up in anticipation because he's hit so many of these shots in games and so many of these shots in practice. They think this is going in. Now, we're watching and thinking that's a low percentage shot. It never goes. They're thinking, Peyton's going to stick this. There's no pressure on the ball. There's nobody defending him. He had time. He had space. He's lining it up. When he lines it up, and I'm sure they've messed around at the end of practice and watched him hit 3 out of 10, 6 out of 10, whatever it was. They got the anticipation. Peyton Pritchard found one thing to add to the group. It's one thing we can all do at our jobs. Like, what is one more thing you bring to the group? Lloyd was just in here. Lloyd was once a producer. A producer. And now
he technically still is.
Oh, the program director. Yeah, he decided he could do both. Scotty's got kids. Scotty's got stuff going on in his personal life. Scotty's done it for a long time. Scotty's calling games and traveling. And all those meetings, which he'd done for years, but it's time for somebody else to do a lot of those meetings. And Scotty was in here last week, and he's going all Godfather on us. Just when I think I'm out, they pull me back in. I got a 10 a.m. meeting. But that's because Scotty knows. All right, I'm not the PD anymore, but what's one thing I can break? Once in a while, there's a meeting, big picture decisions, and Scotty's been down that road before multiple times, and other people haven't been down it at all, and other people only been down it once. And Scotty's been down the road 10 times. So that's one more thing Scotty brings to the group. But Lloyd produces and is program director at top 50 markets. How many times do you think a producer is also the program director, Yak? How many guys have done what Lloyd's done and raised their hand and said, yeah, I can do those two things? People do one and people do the other. Right, not a lot. Like one more thing you bring to the group. So we all want the Jazz to bring in the Joker. That's the move Danny Ainge needs to make, and he's getting big money, and he needs to figure it out. But while we wait for him to figure that out, and they make these other moves, what do they bring to the group? What do they add? Because it's going to be easy to complain and whine about whatever deal they make. And it'll probably be fair. They can't do this. They can't do that. It's true they can't. But since the Joker isn't available today, maybe tomorrow, maybe the day after, you're going to have to take player 79 or player 38. I totally buy into what Locke said. How do you get top 100 players? And as soon as that's answered, then how do you get top 50 and top 25 players? And some of it's got to be grow your own. Draft a guy, and it takes time. It takes a year. It takes 2. It takes 3. And because he uses the language all the time, I'm sure Will is stealing this, and he's been in 2 successful organizations, the Celtics and the Spurs. So he's seen it done, and he's seen how people pull it off. And the Jazz have outperformed expectations 2 years in a row. So if they can get him some talent, can he outperform expectations again? Now, the higher the expectations get, the harder it gets to do that. Maybe he can, maybe he can't. But all he could do the first 2 years is outperform those expectations. It's the same thing with college coaches. College football coach comes in and wins year 1, like, well, he did it with the other guy's roster. Well, of course he did. It's the only way he can. You get the other guy's roster, unless you're Dion and you turn over 80 players, and we don't think that's a good idea. So you got to win with the other guy's roster. We'll find out year 5 if you can win with your roster. It'll be your roster by year 5, maybe by year 3 or 4. And right now, Will's outperformed expectations for 2 years. At some point, the roster moves will be made, the expectations will get higher, and we'll see if he can outperform those. But right now, I'm curious to bring in people with their superpowers and see what Will can make out of them. Because getting the team off to a 10-3 start the first year and keeping him around for 500 as long as he did, that was pretty good. Until they decided, it's tank time after the All-Star break. And last year, 26-26, didn't have that on my bingo card. I got to the point I was thinking, can they get to 40, 42, 44 wins? But they pulled the plug on that season. I mean, if there's anything to criticize the front office for, it's pull the plug earlier or don't pull it at all. But please stop pulling it at 50 games. I'm begging you. All right, DJ and PK, JJ Redick. That's why Lloyd was in here. Lloyd heard David Locke on JJ Redick. If you didn't hear this, stick around. We'll get to it next. There's a poll question up on JJ Redick's future with the Lakers. Go vote on that at David DJ James. And also coming up, the NHL draft. We're going to speak with a guy who does this for a living. Corey Pronman's going to make us smarter. So when you go to the draft party, I hope they have J-Dogs at the draft party. What's the word? Do we have any word on J-Dogs at one or both draft parties next week?
I do know the J-Dogs are celebrating their 20th anniversary next week.
We need to get some investigative reporting. Forget who the Jazz are going to draft. Let's find out if there's J-Dogs for the people. Tell the people what they really want to know. Are there J-Dogs Wednesday or Friday or both or none? All right, Corey Pronman, senior NHL prospects writer and analyst for The Athletic. Coming up, stay with us. Join the Zone for Hans and Scotty's Day of Adoption in partnership with the Humane Society of Utah and Hercules Credit Union. Just $12.80 adoption fees all day on June 25th. Plus, the Zone will be live at the Humane Society of Utah Murray from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Bring home a furry friend on Hans and Scotty's Day of Adoption. DJ and PK, we're joined right now by Corey Pronman, senior NHL prospects writer and analyst for The Athletic. Corey, good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. A little knowledge is a dangerous thing, Corey. I'm a local sportscaster, so for years I've been following the local sports, and I was in the NHL. Now I'm diving into the NHL, and I know just enough to be dangerous. Can you straighten me out?
In what regards?
The NHL draft. The need for the Utah Hockey Club is clearly, defensively, they're like the bottom third of the league. They just gave up too many goals. How many spots do they need to fill, you think, on the roster? How many guys they have who either are good enough or are going to be good enough? How many spots do they need to fill? And it looks like, from what I've read and what I've been told, there's probably 3 guys who, if they aren't ready-made, they're close to ready-made as defensemen in the draft. Do you believe all that? What can you set me straight on?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think Artemi Levshunov, who I think could be the second overall pick, will step into the league right away. And I think maybe Zeev Boyum from Denver has a chance, but might need one more year in college. And then Anton Saleyev, who could go in the top 5 as well, could be NHL ready, but he's actually signed to a contract in Russia for 2 more years, so he'll be at least 2 seasons away from playing in the NHL. In terms of Utah's young blue liners, I mean, on the roster, it's tough to say who's going to be for sure on the roster in 2-3 years. But in terms of the young prospects, I just got done watching Dmitry Simashev practice down at the Dan Milstein Gold Star camp in Fort Lauderdale. He was a 6th overall pick by Utah last year. He looks like a no-doubt top 4 defenseman in a few years. Excellent prospects, nearly 6'6", skates well, physical, has good offensive skills. He looks like a really promising future young defenseman for them, as well as Maverick Lamoureux, who plays in the Quebec League. He's huge, mobile, physical. I think they have those 2 there. I think you look at this pipeline, though, and you wonder who's going to be the power play guy, who's going to get the offense for them on the blue line. It's been Sean Durzi right now for them in the NHL. Is Sean Durzi going to be their guy in 5 years from now? I don't know. So I am looking at Zeev Boyum, and I look at Zane Parekh in this year's draft, and I wonder if either of those 2 with elite offensive traits could be the right player for them at 6.
Saleyev is 6'7". Now, that just catches my eye right away. Why in the world is he not playing basketball? He's 6'7". But it just doesn't look like he'll be on the board with Utah picking 6th. Everybody in the mock draft seems to have him going. Actually, I've seen him slotted 3rd in a lot of them. Is there any chance Utah trades up for him, or they're going in another direction?
Well, you say you don't know a ton about the NHL, so I think one thing that's definitely been common in the NHL draft is wherever you think the Russians are going to go, they tend to go lower. I think NHL teams in general tend to be pretty wary of Russians. Last year, Matvei Michkov, for example, was commonly thought of as a top 4 or 5 player in the draft. He goes 7th overall. A couple of years ago, Danila Yurov, thought of as a common top 10, 15 player. He goes in the 20s because there is a KHL contract, a contract in a foreign league that teams have to deal with. They tend to look at all other possible alternatives that are close before they get to the Russian players. So I think there's a chance Saleyev could be at 6. I don't think it's a great chance. I think people look at a 6'7" defenseman, as you said, a rare athlete who chooses the sport of hockey, and look at how mobile he is, how physical he is, how good he looked against men this year, and think he's going to be gone really, really high. But I've seen crazier things with Russians. I've seen really good Russian players available way later in the draft. So I definitely would not rule out him being there at the 6th pick.
Interesting. All right, good to know. Now, there's a guy, and I may be mispronouncing his name, but Beckett Seneke. I've seen him projected, and if you're looking for bigger guys to dominate on the ice, now he's a winger. He's not a defenseman, so we're changing gears here a little bit. But he's had this growth spurt, and he's 6'3". How much are they drafting looking at the finished product? How long do they want to let guys fill out? Or is that an impossible question to answer? Does that vary from GM to GM and club to club?
Yeah, and I definitely wouldn't rule out Seneke here. I mean, he's just because I think their need is defense. They finish towards the bottom of the league. They need a lot of things. And Seneke, it's not just the growth spurt, it's the growth in his game, too. This was a guy, he didn't have an amazing regular season, but in the Ontario League playoffs, one of the premier junior leagues in the world, he absolutely dominated and just looked like a constant highlight reel machine. Between the 6'3" frame. He's a great skater. He has tremendous puck skills. Like I said, just looked like one of the very best players at that level. And I think he's got a really good chance to be a top-line wing in the NHL. And he definitely would fit the criteria that Utah's management has him to target.
Offensively, in their final year in Arizona, the club was really middle of the league in goals scored. But they've got so many young guys and so many young goal scorers. Is that something where with internal development they can improve, or are there some major additions needed there?
I mean, I think the young players they have currently on the roster, Logan Cooley, Dylan Genther, are really exciting players. I think Daniel Boot, who they drafted with I think it was the 11th pick last summer, he's got a chance to be a top 6 wing and a goal scorer in the NHL. So they definitely have those players coming. I think you're more confident about their forward situation than you are about their defense situation, but they definitely are not done building in that regard. I don't think you can say they have too many high-end players up front, and while Genther and Cooley had promising rookie seasons, they were still just rookies in the NHL. They are not proven commodities like a Clayton Keller is.
Friday, there's going to be a draft party. We'll have double draft parties here. We got an NBA draft party on Wednesday, and they're opening the Delta Center again for an NHL draft party on Friday. But the majority of the draft is Saturday. How long the guys, if there's anybody who's even close to NHL ready, I assume it's first round and first half of the first round. So these other players that we're going to see drafted on Saturday, what's a normal time span for these players to make it to the NHL if they do?
Probably about 3 to 5 years. Like now, I think that's kind of where you start getting close to what the baseball draft is in terms of timeline, where guys are going to go play college hockey or European hockey for a few years and then go to the minors for a few years. But it's also a little different from the baseball draft in that the very top-end guys tend to play either right away or within a year, and you're not waiting 2-3 years for those top picks to make it. But definitely when you get to that second, for the most part, most of the premium talent is gone by the 20th, 25th pick in the NHL draft.
Berkeley Catton, who's there's a lot of wingers and a lot of defensemen here at the top of the draft, and he's one of, I guess, 2 or 3 centers who's going pretty high. Is that somebody they should be interested in? Because that's a guy who might be on the board when they pick.
Yeah, I think the 2 centers that would be of real interest to them would be Catton. He said he's not that big, which I think would worry their management, but he's a great skater, great playmaker, put up a ton of points this year. He's an offensive dynamo, so he's an exciting player. And the other player is Caden Lindstrom. We think Caden Lindstrom's probably going to go ahead of them because he's 6'3", he can fly, he's really physical, he can score goals. But there's some medical questions on him. He had a herniated disc this season, so I think when you have an 18-year-old kid with back issues, I think that concerns teams a little bit. So I think he's considered the second best center by most scouts in the draft, but I think there's even a chance he could be available at the 6th spot as well if teams are concerned a little bit by the medicals and just want to lean a different direction with a top pick.
So we hype up all these guys in the top 10 and talk about what they can and can't do. When you go back and redraft drafts, how does it work out? Because in the NBA, there'll be 2 or 3 guys and are really good picks, and there'll be another, 3 or 4 guys who could play, but they're just kind of guys in the league. And then there'll be 3 or 4 guys who just completely bust and are out of the league pretty quickly and playing in Europe. How does it shake out? How predictable is the top 10 in the NHL, and how much are people taking a flyer and whiffing?
I think you won't see 2 to 3 whiffs in the top 10. That would be, it happens in the odd draft where you have a really bad draft, but for the most part, the top 10 are regular NHL players. I don't know if they're all going to be premium players. You're probably going to get 2 to 3 of those guys who become real premium players, maybe another 4 to 5 who become, good regulars, maybe not true high-end players, and then you might have 1 or 2 where you're like, we probably should have gone a different direction there.
One thing when we heard we were getting NHL hockey here is we heard young teams, some good young talent. Obviously, the results aren't there yet. There's work to do, but a ton of cap room if they choose to spend it. And then I looked up precisely how much. I mean, Vegas needs to sign like 3 guys, and they've got a little more than $1 million under the cap. They're almost capped out. And so I'm pulling down the list looking for Utah, and I can't find it. I'm thinking, did I miss them? Are they still labeled Arizona? I had to pull all the way down to the bottom. They literally, the Utah Hockey Club has $40 million in cap room, the most in the league. Now, whereas Vegas only needs to sign 3 guys, apparently they've only got 14 signed. They need to sign 9, so I guess you got to factor that in a little bit. But that seems like they really could make big changes quickly if they choose. A, do you believe it? And B, do you think they will choose to?
Well, they definitely were a cash-strapped team. I mean, they also were a team that wasn't playing in an NHL building and bringing in NHL revenue. So there was a lot of compounding factors there. But I think, they've been rebuilding there for a good number of years. Like I said before, they have some exciting young players. So whether it is this summer or next summer, at some point, Bill Armstrong and their management group is going to decide it's time to turn the corner here and it's time to start pushing for the playoffs. And they can use their cap space to be aggressive. I don't think you want to just start spending willy-nilly because you don't want to get yourself into bad contracts and set back your rebuild. But they definitely have a lot of opportunities here to go after some desirable players, whether it is someone like Jake Gensel in the free agent market or trying to acquire Martin Necas, who's probably not going to re-sign in Carolina. So they definitely have opportunities to use that significant cap space. And now they are in a desirable market and in an NHL building, so people will want to come play there.
They're in a desirable market. You can knock people over with a feather right now because as an NBA market, this market has been talked down a lot for decades. Why would NHL players find Salt Lake desirable? What is it that would attract them?
Well, I think the difference between the NBA and the NHL is significant. In the NHL, you have a bunch of cold Canadian cities. It's a lot of northern cities, and also, just quite frankly, they're in an NHL building, and I think in Arizona it got really bad there towards the end, where they were becoming, quite frankly, the running joke of the league, and in Salt Lake City now you have it's a real NHL market. It's the real facilities, and they can absolutely attract NHL talent.
If they decide to go all in this summer, what does the free agent class look like? Who would be some of the people they'd be targeting, and where they've been playing, and what kind of success have they had?
I think, like I said, the 2 big names I think out there. Well, Jake Gensel is the free agent on everyone's mind. I think he's going to get some really big offers from a lot of teams. So I don't know whether they'd be the favorite, but they have money to throw around. And I think as well, he's on the free agent market. He'd be a trade candidate because he's a restricted free agent who I don't think Carolina can fit under the cap. But Martin Necas would be a significant target as well as a potential top-line forward who needs a new contract.
Do teams really transform themselves in free agency, or do trades and draft picks and the minor league pipeline, is that how teams really go up and down in the NHL?
It can vary. I mean, I think you look at the Stanley Cup Finals right now, Edmonton was built mostly through the draft. But the Florida Panthers, I think there's only 2 players on their team they really drafted. So there's definitely different models.
Should I just assume that's because one place is Florida and one place is Edmonton, or is that oversimplifying it?
Well, you're pretty much hinting at what I said earlier.
Yeah,
so
back to the cold weather, small towns, right?
Yes.
There it is. Do you actually think Edmonton is going to pull this off, coming from down 3-0?
I mean, I would never bet against Connor McDavid. That guy's a freak of nature. And just like the way I've never seen a guy skate like him, and they'll just play him 40 minutes a night and hope he can just pull his magic off for 2 more games in a row. But I think the betting odds are still in Florida's favor to at least win one of the next 2. But it's really exciting, and I could see it really go either way.
Corey, we appreciate the time. Thanks for joining us and getting us up to speed a little bit on the NHL draft and the Stanley Cup Finals. We appreciate it.
Sure thing. Thank you.
Corey Pronman, senior NHL prospects writer and analyst for The Athletic. DJ and PK, when we come back, everything you missed in this show. David Locke, interesting stuff. J.J. Redick. What he said about J.J. Redick, it brought Lloyd into the studio. What? We'll get to that next. Stay with us.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I present...
This is J.J. and Alex.
Joining us right now on the program, glad to have her along, the commissioner of the Mountain West Conference, Gloria Navarre, is on the show here with us.
You know, we're looking at everything. I don't think we're as far down the line as the Big 12. Certainly, I was at the Pac-12 when the prospect of private equity was brought to the board, and at that time, there didn't seem to be an appetite for it, although certainly times have changed since then, and I think that will be certainly a gateway to how folks think about private equity in college sports. So we have begun conversation, and most of it, honestly, is a learning process for me. I do not claim to be an expert in private equity, but what I've gleaned so far is an influx of cash in exchange for payback against your future media rights and future revenues.
Catch JJ and Alex afternoons from 3 to 6. Presented by G2G Bars on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
DJ and PK, it's 97.5 The Zone. Time to catch you up to date on everything you've missed over the course of this show. The Slacker radio headlines at 9 a.m. are brought to you by Tim Dahle Mazda Southtown. Find your new Mazda at the south end of the valley at Tim Dahle Mazda Southtown. That's Tim Dahle Mazda Southtown in Sandy. We've talked about so many things this morning. Utah Jazz team building with David Locke, who says, hey, if Levine's the guy, make the deal and don't complain. Get a top 100 player. Now, it may be too much. Somebody else may want him. The Jazz may pivot to somebody else who's a top 100 player. Who knows if it'll be Levine or not. But because his name's been out there, some stories we used him. And David's point was find a way to add top 100 players. There's 100 of them. There's 30 teams in the league. On average, you ought to have 3. The better teams obviously have 4, maybe 5 in the case of the Celtics, right? How do you get those guys? How do you get somebody who's outside the top 100 and help them grow into the top 100? Colin Sexton, Taylor Hendricks, Keontae George. How do you find someone who's paid like they're 40, but they're actually 80 and somebody's looking to move them? And the other thing we talked about is do not be afraid of the longer contracts and the bigger contracts right now. Levine made $40 million this year. It goes to 43, 45 with an option for 48. The last 2 years of the deal will be after the new NBA TV money kicks in. And Locke was 100% on board with my theory that guys who are making $40 million now, and that's a lot under this cap, those guys are going to be making $60 and $70 million under the next cap, and that's going to be a lot. So the $40 million deal, first off, there was a time when I thought that was untradeable. And then PK's yelling, wait, 1 just got traded. Hey, 2 just got traded. Hey, 3 just got moved. They're moving $40 million contracts. Don't be scared of them. Yeah, especially because 40s, orange is the new black. Yeah, well, 40 is going to be the new 25. It's going to be movable. So I think the downside to going after somebody like Zach LaVine, now I don't know what the cost is going to be. I don't know what they want, and I don't know what somebody else is going to be willing to pay. But it doesn't scare me the way it would have 12 months ago. And you can say he's underachieved, empty numbers, he has great numbers, his team doesn't win. Yeah. But if there's one thing we've seen out of Will Hardy, and it's only to a low degree because it's early and it's all he's been allowed, is that you give him a bunch of parts and he puts together something that looks pretty good. This team out of the gate has overachieved both years. We looked at the pieces, but he put them together and made them look a little better than they are. And I think that comes down to emphasizing the superpowers. Don't worry about what guys can't do. If a guy can score from this spot on the floor, how do we get him shots from this spot on the floor? Don't be lecturing the guy, you need to shoot from that spot over there, and you need to get better. While true, that's not going to help you win games today. It's the kind of thing you work on in the summer, and it pays off later. So, who do they get? And even if they're not top 100, can they grow into top 100? The team's short on talent. Who are they going to add? Levine's the hot number because it just looks like the Bulls are blowing it up. The Chicago Bulls have a bunch of guys over 30. They just traded one of them. Alex Caruso is 30, and he's got 1 year left, just a shade under $10 million. Good get for Oklahoma City. I like the trade for them. He doesn't need a lot of shots. He impacts games with other things as shooting, but he is a 38% career three-point shooter. That number's dragged down by his rookie year when he was terrible. He shot 41% last year. He's had 3 years in his 7-year career where he's been over 40%. The guy can shoot it. He ought to get good looks in Oklahoma City because you got to defend other people. So he'll defend. He can run the floor. He can score in transition. He averages 3.5 assists and 3.5 boards. He does a little bit of everything. Good role guy. Maybe a poor man's Derek White. How about that?
A poor man's Derek White?
Derek White.
That'd be quite a pickup.
Derek White is the 4th or 5th best starter for the Celtics, but there are quarters, halves, and games where everybody else gets out of the way and lets Derek go to work.
And he was very good in the postseason.
He was. But I think what they have in common is they make winning plays. There's a big moment, there's a big play, get a steal, run a break, throw a good pass, get out in front, get your team an easy bucket, hit a big shot from the corner when they leave you. You're not the guy who's going 20 and 10. But if they leave you to go defend 20 and 10 guy, you make them pay. That's what Caruso and White did. Now, White does it, I think, to a higher level. But Caruso hasn't been on great teams, with one exception, the Lakers in the bubble. So he does have 30 games of playoff experience, 20 of them in the bubble. I think 31 games maybe. 20 of them in the bubble. So he's been in some of these big games. I like to trade for the Thunder. They're clearly in win-now mode. They traded a guy who'd been in the pros for in the NBA for 3 years, and they traded him for a 30-year-old guy. And with that guy gone, and presumably with 34-year-old DeMar DeRozan departing as a free agent from Chicago, 29-year-old Zach LaVine, available. 33-year-old Nikola Vucevic, available. 30-year-old Andre Drummond, free agent. I think a lot of these older guys are out in Chicago, and they'll start over. So. Now, the J.J. Redick story. He is the new coach of the Lakers. And we've got a poll question up. How long will he last? He signed a 4-year deal. So I put up on this will shock you, on the poll question with 4 options, I put up, how many full seasons will J.J. Redick coach the Lakers? 1, 2, 3, or 4. Now, 59% of you, and there's over 200 votes, 59% of you say he'll be there 2 years. Okay, that makes sense. Darvin Ham was there 2 years. Luke Walton got 3. Frank Vogel got 3. Byron Scott got 2. Mike D'Antoni got 1, and Mike Brown got 1. They got parts of the second, but they didn't finish the second. And then I asked David Locke, let the people hear his answer. How many full seasons will J.J. Redick coach the Lakers? We have a poll question up. I'll tell you what the answer is. We're over 200 votes. I'll tell you what the answer for the public is. 7. 7. David.
Going to get a second contract.
David. You're really going 7. That's your answer. You're not messing around. You're going to stick with that.
Yep. We'll get a second contract.
That brought Lloyd Cole into the studio. 7. Now, by comparison, Phil Jackson had a 5-year run, and he had a 6-year run. He did do 11 of 12. He wasn't gone that long. And Pat Riley did 8. But they won multiple championships. And Locke's point he went on to explain is that, and it makes some sense, when a group is together and they get tired of each other or there aren't the results and management gets tired of them, well, you get rid of the coach before you get rid of the star players. But in this case, David says LeBron's gone after 2 years. So that's a reset for Redick. And AD's gone after 3 or 4 years. That's a reset for Redick. And so then he'll get to the second contract. All right. I'll give him that I went from, when I say, David, that's from years of dealing with PK. And I know he messes and he messes with people and he sticks to it. But you can eventually, okay, I was messing around because of this, but I really think this. But David stuck with it. Now, I guess that's plausible. I think the 2 key players both have a timeline on them, one guy because of retirement and one guy because of the length of his contract. That could give a coach a reset. But, man, the Bus kids are just not dad. They don't have the same magic touch with people. I don't know how Jerry Buss did it, but he maintained a long working relationship with Jerry West. And Jerry West was awesome. But Jerry West did have a cantankerous side. Not to the degree, I don't buy the whole HBO profile. I totally buy that was over top, that was Hollywooded up. But Jerry would cuss people out. And Jerry was opinionated, and Jerry would threaten to quit. That part I believe. There are multiple stories about him threatening to quit with the Lakers and Warriors. I believe them. If you do that, and generally it was to save somebody, I think with the Warriors it was like, draft Klay Thompson or I'm out of here. You don't get to make that kind of mistake. I'm not going to stick around and take the blame for that caliber of mistake. And I think it was worthy. I think it was a similar thing with the Lakers. Okay, that's fine. And Joe Mazzulla, I don't know if you read this. The Celtics coach got a question, but there's so many press conferences, so many things happened in the finals. He got a question about West. Mazzulla played at West Virginia. And as Jerry's family said in the statement after he passed away, Jerry left West Virginia, but his heart never did. So Joe Mazzulla told this story that he went in there as a pretty, well-thought-of recruit, and he played and had some success as a freshman and sophomore, but also he was immature and there were off-court issues, and West felt like he was wasting his talent. And you don't get to waste your talent at West Virginia without Jerry weighing in and helping the coaching staff. Hey, can you help get this guy in line? Yes, give me a number. And Jerry called up and cussed him out. You're bleeping blowing it. You've got talent. You're bleeping wasting it. Bleeping knucklehead stuff. And Joe is quoting. And West is dropping F-bombs. And he said it was a good, you can go back, if you Google this, you can read the story, and I'm probably messing up some of the details here. I don't have it in front of me. But basically, it sounded like it was 10 to 15 minutes of Jerry West on the phone letting Joe Mazzulla have it. You got to grow up. You're really good. You're going to regret this. You owe yourself a better performance. You owe the school a better performance. You owe your teammates, and you really let them have it. And Mazzulla said it was a defining moment. And then they had great tournament runs, and Mazzulla played great. And so it really helped. His game took a step forward, both individually and as a team. It was good for him. And then he said there was another story. West had him out, and he stayed at Jerry West's house. How's that for staying at Jerry West's house? Okay, that made me a little nervous. I think he'd be more comfortable in a hotel. But he overslept, and he missed one of the open gyms at UCLA, which he didn't fill in all the details. He just said West let him have it for that in the kitchen, I think. But they have a lot of the pros will play in the summer, and so for a college kid or a young pro to go out and get that opportunity would be a big deal to go out there and play with, Magic Johnson or Kobe or, there've been generations of them out there, and the best players get the best games in L.A. in the summer. And West got him into that, and then he overslept, and he said, Jerry, let me have it for that too. But again, a moment where you grow up and you realize, wow, the logo thinks I'm blowing it. Maybe I better take a second look at this. And somehow Jerry Buss coexisted with West, and they did great things. Jerry recognized talent. Jerry Buss knew about stardom, knew about celebrity, and knew about high-end talent and how to work with it. But it just, first with his son and now with his daughter, it just doesn't seem to be clicking. It's been a little better under Jeannie. But is that just because LeBron wanted to be there? Now, managing LeBron's a little tricky, too. Most of you think 2 years for Redick, and I see where you're going with that. I agree. I don't think he's getting to the end of the deal. I think there'll be a buyout. Not a Detroit Pistons style buyout. I'm still blown away by the $65 million for Monty. Holy cow. We had Pablo Mastroeni on. How do you win? How do they do 15 unbeaten in a row? Competitiveness, grinding. I really do feel like they've got a collection of guys who are skilled and are given 110%. Now, how they'll find another gear in the playoffs is a great question. Have they left it all out there? Do they have another level to go to? Pablo thinks they do. Keep cleaning up mistakes, keep getting better. Defensively, they're not as good as they've been. They gave up 11 goals in the first 13 games. They've given up 11 goals in the next 6. Not a good trend. Pablo's a defensive-minded guy. The position he played, what he believes, he wants more than that. Now, it's certainly been impacted by injuries. The Galaxy are coming in tomorrow night, and both teams are shorthanded. Galaxy, the guy who makes it go for them, they're point guard. Ricky Pooch is out. He's hurt. He's been out for a while, so he won't play. And Justin Glad, RSL's longtime center back, and they're speed guys, so the teams don't get him behind. Justin's the guy who turns around and runs people down, so they're not just walking in on McMath in goal 1-on-1. And he's hurt, and he's out. So there are other guys for both teams who'll be out as well. So we talked with Pablo about that and about Katranis and what he gives the team. They got a bunch of guys playing at a high level. Emeka Nelly's having a career year. Andres Gomez is having a career year. Chicho's having a career year. I think Cotranas is having a career year. Diego Luna is having a breakout year. They got a lot of guys peaking at the same time, which is why they're in first place right now. The Galaxy are second, and if that game's not sold out, it will be. So you can check. I don't think it's sold out yet, but it's close. So we talked with Pablo. And then we talked to NHL Draft. Corey Pronman, senior NHL prospects writer and analyst for The Athletic, doesn't know that the Utah Hockey Club goes all in this year. Apparently, it's not that great a free agent. Now, I don't know what they can do through the trade market. It's not that great a free agent class. He named a couple free agents. I'm like, okay, dive into that. Give us some free agents. And he said, no, I did. Those are the two. That doesn't sound particularly deep. Draft parties Wednesday and Friday night. Make your plans accordingly. NBA draft round 1 Wednesday, party. Round 2 Thursday, no party. Thursday afternoon for the second round. NHL draft party Friday night for round 1. No party Saturday when they do rounds 2 through 6, right, Yuck? The NFL 7, the NHL 6.
Yes.
6. Right. All right. So rounds 2 through 6. Although they got multiple rounds with 3 picks. They got a ton
They
of
have
draft
13 overall selections. I think 3 in the second round and 3 in the third round alone. So Saturday could be a very busy day.
Yeah. The NCAA has presented a plan to expand from 68 teams to 72 or 76. That will happen. The expectation is the expansion of the tournament will occur. Yeah, well, that's because the TV networks will pay more money. And I don't think we're going to see conference champions go to Dayton anymore. I think we're going to see at-large teams go. They will either take most of those berths or all of them because it's an extra paycheck. And originally, hey, where are the power leagues? You little guys play on Tuesday and Wednesday for the right to be in our tournament. Wait, you can make more money doing that? We will take the Tuesday and Wednesday berths. You, the little people, will begin on Thursday. We want the bonus checks. But there will be more games. Just go to 96 and get it over with. Every site can have games on Tuesday and Wednesday. Everybody's doing their classes online anyway if they're going. We're about to have employees who don't go to go to 96. We know that's where this is going. I feel like, remember when Steve Spurrier got asked about the 4-team playoff? Hey, we've had 2 teams in BCS and everybody's unhappy. They're going to 4. Do you like it? Do I like it? Not as much as I'm going to like 16, but yeah, I like it. Hilarious answer from Steve Spurrier. That's what I feel about this. Anything about 72 or 76, I like it. Not as much as I'm going to like 96. The thing I love about it, and this is probably the thing that scares the power leagues about it, when they go to 96, they'll have 24-team regionals. So right now, the 16 seed is, the 24 seed, the 16s will just get moved to 24. And so Weber State now goes in the years they make it, and they get seeded 14, 15, or 16, right? Well, they'll get seeded 22, 23, or 24. But the difference will be, and this is why I look forward to it, is those teams, the Weber States of the world, the UC Santa Barbaras of the world, the Northern Arizona Lumberjacks of the world, they won't be playing 1, 2, and 3 anymore with no chance to win. They'll be playing 9, 10, 11, and they will have a chance to win. And when they win, they will play 6, 7, or 8, and they'll have another chance to win. Bring it on. I like the bigger tournament. Let's go. I'm ready. Let's do it. And you're saying, there'll be a bunch of games I don't care about. Yeah, and they'll all be happening at the same time, and you won't be watching them anyway, so what does it matter? You'll pick out the 1 or 2 games that do matter when your teams play. It'll be right back down to 32 by Saturday morning like it always is. So no problems. It'll be great. DJ and PK, your feedback when we come back. Stay with us.
And it's all over almost here. Don't go nowhere.
DJ and PK, it's time for your feedback. Question of the morning, how many full seasons will J.J. Redick coach the Lakers? 4-year deal. He's the new guy. Last coach who lasted 4 years was named Phil Jackson. Everybody else is out of there in 1, 2, or 3. 57% of you say he'll last 2 years. 24% of you think he'll only last 1. Warrior Hunt says the LA pick just keeps getting more and more valuable for us. We better keep it. I don't know that it's more valuable. I don't know. I get that you believe it could be valuable, And it could be, Locke ran out the whole timeline. I covered it again in the last segment, that if LeBron is there 2 more years, he's 39, and he's now under contract for just 1 year. The 27 pick, he'd have to play 3 years. So he'd have to have a big impact at 42. That seems unlikely. Anthony Davis is signed through that, but if LeBron goes, will AD demand a trade within a year? Now, he'll be making $60 million the year before, $65 that year, and $70 the year after. But with the new TV contract kicking in, I think that contract is tradable. We'll have to see what the new salary cap is. We'll have to see what the new maxes are. But the $30, $40, $50 million players, I think they're going to 50, 60, 70. Some people are saying it's going to go to $100 million. I don't know where NBA revenue is going, but it's going way, way up. We know the network contract is going to triple and maybe a little more than that. The 27 could definitely be valuable. And I think they will hold on to it. If they move it, then they've moved it for somebody really, really good. They held out to get that pick. They wanted that pick badly. Tyler says JJ's going to last 3 years, but only because LeBron won't be there for that many. LeBron this year, then LeBron leaves and the pressure's off. If LeBron stays on the Lakers, 2 unless they win a championship, which they won't. So Tyler's more thinking David Locke, that JJ Redick gets more time as the stars leave. Tyler brings up LeBron, but David brought up LeBron and AD. Soccer fan sent this one in. B-Dots. We should talk more about the move RSL made to have club legend Jason Kreis return. Look what he's done with his roster and with his coach. If we win another championship, it'll be because of this man. I think Jason is flattered, but I think Jason to tell you to cool your jets. If he gets all the credit, he gets all the blame too. There were a lot of things in place when he showed up. I do think he and Pablo are pretty much on the same page. First off, soccer is a small world, and they are players from the same generation, and they at least had some awareness of each other. But Jason was at practices. He was at the training sessions last year, and there's one in particular. I probably saw him there, and I only go once a week, and I saw him there at least twice, maybe 3 times. Now, his kid was at the U. He had a reason to be in town. I get all of that. But this wasn't the first time he'd been rumored and linked to returning to Utah, and sure enough, here he is. But anyway, at this one session, he's leaning on the railing, and then Pablo comes up and does his media, and then they walk away together. And they were walking away like it was kumbaya. They were of the same mind. They were so comfortable with each other. Chicho was already in place, and they'd already made the decision to invest in Andres Gomez, so a lot of things were in place. But I think where Jason deserves a lot of credit, he was right in the middle of the room with changing the game model. And right in the middle of the room with bringing in Catranas. So he has definitely had a positive impact. There's no doubt about that. But if he gets all the credit, he gets all the blame. And I think he knows he doesn't deserve all the credit because a lot of these moves were made before he got here. But he has been right in the middle of the room for a couple of key decisions, no doubt. And I think going forward, he's going to be right in the middle of the room for more. And I think what they do this summer is going to have a big, big impact on how the playoffs go. I think they've got to bring in a couple people, and Pablo talked about that. He mentioned a defender, and he mentioned an attacker, or the positions, not specific players. Wherever you get your podcast, you can hear Pablo talk about that. How it came up, that matters. How much is he prompted? How much is he just saying this is what's got to happen? You can listen to it wherever you get your podcast. David Locke as well. DJ and PK, Jake and Ben are next. Stay with us.